I spent 3 years saving for that plane ticket. I couldn't stop thinking about that trip. I was 19, from a small working-class town where dreams usually stayed as ideas. Art school in New York felt unreal, like something meant for other people with money and connections, not someone like me who counted every dollar twice. It was my first time on a plane, and my body never really relaxed during the flight. I watched the screen and kept thinking about the apartment waiting for me. When we landed, excitement pushed through the fear. I followed the signs, collected my suitcase, and ordered a ride to my Airbnb. I remember thinking that once I got there, everything would calm down and I would finally be able to breathe. The car arrived quickly. The driver smiled, said my name clearly, and helped me with my bag. He looked normal, clean, polite, like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. That was enough to make me trust him. The city swallowed us as soon as we left the airport. Lights, traffic, buildings stacked so high they blocked the sky. I stared out the window trying to take it all in, telling myself this was the place where my life was about to change. The driver stayed quiet at first, which I appreciated. The radio played softly and the car moved smoothly through traffic. My phone showed we were getting closer, and I relaxed into the seat, letting the tension drain out of my shoulders. Then he started talking. He asked where I was from, what I was studying, why I chose New York. His voice sounded friendly, curious, and I answered without thinking much about it. I talked about art school, about leaving home, about how hard it was to get there. I was smiling when I spoke, proud of myself for making it this far. His questions changed slowly. He told me I was pretty, asked if I was alone in the city, asked if I had someone waiting for me. My answers got shorter and I stopped looking at him in the mirror. When my phone said we were close, the car did not slow down. My stomach tightened and I sat up straight, watching the streets pass by too fast. He asked what would happen if we kept driving, said it like a joke, like something playful. I told him to stop the car and let me out. My voice was firm, but my hands were shaking in my lap. He laughed, louder this time, and kept driving. The car slowed near my address for a second, and I thought I had overreacted. That this was just an uncomfortable misunderstanding. I reached for the door handle, already planning how fast I would get out. The door did not open. I tried the other one, then the first again, pulling harder, feeling panic rise into my chest. I told him to unlock the doors, told him this was not funny and that I wanted to leave now. My voice cracked and I hated how scared I sounded. He did not answer. Instead, he pressed the accelerator and the city rushed past us again, faster and louder than before. My heart hammered so hard it felt like I was trying to escape my body. I screamed and hit the window, not because I thought it would help, but because I did not know what else to do. He reached back with a cloth, his movements calm, practiced, like this was routine. I tried to twist away, tried to kick, but the seatbelt cut into my shoulder and held me in place. The smell hit me immediately, sharp and sweet, and my chest burned as I fought for air. My vision blurred, and the lights outside melted together until everything went dark. When I woke up, my wrists were on fire. Thick rope cut into my skin, tying me to a narrow bed in a low room that smelled like damp concrete and old sweat. A single light buzzed above me, and the sound drifted straight into my head. I tested the ropes again and again, even though I knew it was useless. My breathing sped up, and my chest felt tight, like there was not enough air in the room. I tried to scream, but my throat burned, and the sound came out weak. A girl entered carrying a bowl. She looked younger than me, her face pale and tired, her eyes avoiding mine. She told me I had to eat, said I needed strength, and held the bowl close to my mouth until I obeyed. Her hands were shaking, and that scared me more than anything. Later, another woman came, older, rougher, her voice sharp. She untied me and dragged me through a hallway into a large room where other girls sat on the floor. They all looked about my age, all silent, all watching me with the same mix of fear and understanding. That's when I realized this was not temporary. Days blurred together, measured only by hunger, exhaustion, and commands. They trained us to dance, corrected us when we failed, and punished us when we did not move fast enough. Slaps, kicks, being dragged away and brought back quieter than before became part of the routine. They kept us weak on purpose. Food was scarce, sleep was limited, and something was always mixed into whatever we ate that made our heads feel heavy and slow. Fear lived in our bodies, even when nothing was happening, because we never knew what could come next. I met Emma there. She had been taken weeks before me and knew how things worked. She whispered advice at night, told me when to stay invisible, and shared what little food she could. We clung to each other because being alone was unbearable. Before every punishment, there was silence. That silence was worse than the pain because it gave you time to imagine what was coming. When they called names, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I would be sick. One night, a door was left unlocked. Emma grabbed my hand without speaking, and we ran. We moved fast through halls and stairways, our feet slipping on cold floors, our breathing loud in our ears. Every sound felt like it would give us away, and every second stretched too long. Outside, the air was freezing, and my lungs burned as we ran down the street without direction. Footsteps followed us, getting closer, and my heart pounded so hard I could barely think. Emma slipped and fell hard onto the pavement. I turned back, grabbed her arm, and tried to pull her up, but hands reached out of the dark and grabbed her legs. She screamed my name, her voice breaking, and I tried to fight them, but someone shoved me back so hard I fell. Emma looked at me once, her face full of fear and pain, and told me to run. I ran because I was terrified and weak, and because stopping would have meant we both disappeared. I survived, but I did not arrive in New York the way I imagined. Now I live somewhere else, somewhere smaller, where I feel less exposed. I tell this story because it happens more than people want to believe. Because kindness can be used as a weapon. Because someone like Emma deserves to be remembered.
The first thing you need to understand is that I wasn't distracted, drunk, or half asleep that night, because I know people like to assume that when something bad happens. I was fully awake, tired from work, yes, but aware of when I was and what time it was. It was late, close to 11, and I was taking the subway home like I'd done hundreds of times before. I work downtown, long hours, nothing exciting, and the subway is part of my routine, whether I like it or not. The line I take has a reputation, and everyone in New York knows it. People talk about it being strange, about seeing things that don't quite fit. But after a while, you stop listening. You normalize behavior that shouldn't feel normal. That night I got on the train, found a seat and leaned back, already thinking about getting home and taking off my shoes. The car was half full, quiet in that uncomfortable way where everyone avoids looking at each other too much. Nothing stood out at first, and that is what makes what happened harder to explain. I sat there for maybe a minute before I felt that uncomfortable pressure in my chest that tells you someone is watching you. Not casually, not by accident, but with intention. Across from me sat an older woman wearing a long dark coat, even though it wasn't that cold. Her posture was stiff and unnatural, like she was holding herself in place. She was staring straight at me. I mean directly at my face, without blinking or shifting her eyes, even once. Next to her sat a man, around my age, maybe a little older, slouched forward with his hands clasped between his knees. He never looked up, not when the train moved, not when people got on or off. He looked tense, like his body was working hard to stay still. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, because people stare on the subway and sometimes they're just weird. Still, every time I looked back at the woman, her eyes were exactly where I left them. Her mouth stayed slightly open, and her breathing, if she was breathing, was impossible to notice. I stood up and moved closer to the door, pretending I was getting ready for my stop, even though it was still several stations away. My heart was already beating too fast, and I hated that I could feel it in my throat. At the next stop, a man got on and stood near the pole in front of me, and the moment his eyes locked onto mine, I knew something was very wrong. Before anything physical happened, there was a long stretch of silence that made my skin crawl. The doors closed, the train started moving again, and the standing man didn't look away, even once. His expression was serious, focused, like he was counting something in his head. I glanced back at the woman and she leaned forward just slightly, enough to confirm she was still watching me. My hands tightened around my bag and I scanned the car looking for anyone paying attention, but everyone seemed trapped in their own world. The standing man stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, and my body reacted before my brain could catch up. I shifted sideways, trying to put distance between us, but the train slowed, and that is when he grabbed me. His grip was strong and sudden, fingers digging into my arm through my coat. I shouted and tried to twist free, my bag slipping off my shoulders as the doors opened. People stared, but no one moved. Dragged me out onto the platform, and I managed to wrench my arm free by slamming my elbow backward. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I ran, shoes slipped slightly on the concrete as the train door slammed shut behind me. I took the stairs, stopping, my lungs burning, my legs shaking as I burst out onto the street. The night air felt cold and sharp, and the city suddenly felt empty, like I had stepped into the wrong version of it. I ran without direction, turning corners at random, driven by pure panic and the sound of footsteps that I could not always hear, but felt were there. My thoughts were scattered, jumping from escape routes to worst outcomes, and I could barely keep track of where I was. I turned into a narrow passage between two buildings without thinking, only realizing my mistake when the space closed in, and there was no way forward. I stopped, breath ragged, and turned around just as the man from the subway stepped into the entrance. He raised his hands slowly, his face tense but not angry, and spoke in a low, controlled voice. "Calm down. I'm not going to hurt you." I pressed myself against the wall, my legs weak, my voice shaking as I told him to stay back. I begged him to leave me alone, to let me go, because I didn't understand what was happening. "I pulled you out because you were in danger. That woman on the train was dead." His words didn't make sense at first, and I told him that, my voice breaking as fear turned into confusion. He took a careful step closer and explained that he worked at a morgue and knew what dead skin looked like, knew when a body was being held up instead of standing on its own. "The man next to her was holding her. He was waiting for the right stop, and you caught his attention." I stood there, frozen, just overwhelmed and desperate to survive. I asked him why he didn't warn me instead of dragging me, and he said there was no time, that people freeze when they are warned. I wanted to believe him, because believing him meant I wasn't alone anymore. I thanked him, my hands still shaking, and told him I needed to get somewhere safe. He stepped aside and motioned toward the street. "Go now. Do not stop." I walked past him slowly, every muscle tight, and when I stepped back onto the sidewalk, I saw the man from the subway standing under a streetlight, smiling directly at me. That is when I ran again. The man chased me, his footsteps fast and steady behind mine, and panic pushed my body beyond what I thought it could handle. I crossed streets without looking, barely avoided cars, and felt my legs screaming in protest as I forced them to keep moving. I ducked into an apartment lobby and slammed the door shut, pressing my weight against the glass as he hit it hard with his shoulder. For a moment, I thought it would break, but then he stopped. Behind him stood the man who claimed he saved me, watching quietly, and the look they exchanged told me everything I needed to know. I ran deeper into the building, found another exit, and didn't stop until I reached a crowded avenue filled with noise and people. I stayed there until my body finally gave out, shaking uncontrollably among strangers. Nothing was reported the next day, which somehow made everything worse. I changed my routines, my routes, and my habits, but I never regained the sense of safety I had before. That night taught me that sometimes the danger is not loud or obvious, and sometimes the people who claim to save you are only waiting for a better moment.
I didn't realize anything was wrong right away, but something shifted the moment that woman stepped onto the bus. I was sitting in the last row of a city bus in New York, leaning slightly toward the window, talking quietly with my friend Marcus. We were not arguing, not joking loudly, and not drawing attention. We were just talking, even though we were tired and just trying to get home. I was doing nothing that could stand out. At that point, nothing felt dangerous. Nothing felt off. Then the bus slowed at another stop and a woman boarded. She got on already yelling. Her voice hit the front of the bus before her body fully entered it, sharp and fast, arguing about the fare, accusing the driver of things that made no sense. People turned their heads, not curious but alert, the way you get when you know something might explode. She refused to pay and kept stepping forward as if daring the driver to stop her. The driver told her to move along, clearly wanting the situation to end. After a few seconds that felt longer than they were, he let her pass just to avoid a bigger problem. As she walked down the aisle, her movements were uneven, aggressive, like her body was reacting before her thoughts. She looked at people one by one, scanning faces too closely, muttering things that were impossible to understand. Marcus stopped talking. I felt my jaw tighten without realizing it. There were empty seats everywhere, but she stopped next to a young woman sitting alone and started yelling at her, demanding the seat. When the girl hesitated, the woman shoved her hard enough that people gasped. The girl stood up shaken and moved away while the woman dropped into the seat, breathing fast, proud, and victorious. It was strange, uncomfortable, and wrong, but still, I believed it would end there. In this city, you learn to accept a certain level of chaos just to keep moving. Before anything happened, there was a silence that felt forced, like the bus itself was holding its breath. The woman stopped muttering, stopped moving, stopped reacting to anyone else around her. That sudden stillness was what made my skin crawl. I felt her attention before I saw it. I turned my head slowly, not wanting to make it obvious. She was standing half twisted in her seat, staring directly at me. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, locked on my face like she had finally found something that she had been searching for. Her mouth hung slightly open, and her breathing was loud enough that I could hear it over the engine. I froze, not because I was trying to be brave, because I could not understand why she was looking at me, what she wanted, or what she thought I had done. My heart started pounding so hard it hurt. Marcus leaned closer and whispered my name, asking if I was okay. I didn't answer. I turned back toward the front, pretending I had not seen anything, forcing myself to breathe slowly, telling myself that eye contact meant nothing and that people like her moved on quickly. The bus kept driving, but the fear stayed. As we approached a small park, the bus slowed again and the traffic light ahead turned red. I remember thinking that we were about to stop and that the doors might open. Just thinking that that woman could get up again terrified me. And then everything changed. There was sudden movement behind me, fast and violent, followed by a scream that cut straight through my head. She was on her feet, pointing at me, her face twisted with rage, yelling that I was following her, that I was watching her, that I needed to leave her alone.
"I know what you're doing! Stop following me! Leave me alone!"
I did not have time to speak or even fully turn around. She launched herself at me with terrifying speed, grabbing my hair with both hands and pulling with a strength that did not feel human. I screamed as pain exploded across my scalp, and I felt large sections of my hair tear free in her fists. She dragged me down the aisle, my body hitting the floor hard, my knees scraping against the dirty surface. She did not let go. People tried to pull her off, but she screamed and fought them, clawing at my face, digging her nails into my skin, yelling that she was going to kill me and make me suffer.
"You think you can hurt me? I'll hurt you first! I'll kill you!"
She tried to push her fingers into my eyes, and I turned my head just in time, feeling her nails rake across my cheek instead. I saw a wire around her neck, and when she reached for it, pulling it up, trying to free it, the pressure on my head loosened just enough for others to finally tear her away. When they pulled her off me, I collapsed on the floor, shaking so hard I could not control my hands. My head burned, my face stung, and I could feel blood running down my neck. Hair was scattered everywhere around me, and people stared in horror. When the police arrived, she was still screaming, pointing at me, accusing me of stalking her and threatening her, repeating over and over that she was defending herself. Even when witnesses spoke up, her story never changed. They took her away and an ambulance checked me, but I refused to go to the hospital. I just wanted to be somewhere familiar, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. Days later, people from the neighborhood approached me and told me they knew her, that she caused problems constantly, that she had attacked others before. They said she was sick and that was why she would be released. Weeks passed, but the fear stayed. Then one night, coming home from work, I saw police lights near my block and heard that my dog was missing. Before we even reached the house, my chest felt tight and my hands would not stop shaking. The windows were shattered, glass covering the ground, and my dog was nowhere in sight. She came holding him by the collar, a knife in the other hand, screaming that she would kill him if we got closer. Her eyes were the same ones I had seen on the bus.
You don't come near me, I'll kill it. I swear I will.
Marcus moved carefully, circling behind her while she focused on me. When he grabbed her arms from the back, she screamed and swung the knife wildly, cutting the air inches from his body. They fell. She fought violently, biting and kicking, but neighbors rushed out and helped restrain her until the police arrived. They hospitalized her again. Then they released her again. Months later, I saw her wandering the streets, yelling at people who were not there, accusing strangers of following her. She was free. She is still out there, and one day she will look at someone else the same way. A young woman was violently attacked while traveling on the bus in an incident that occurred without any prior argument or provocation. The victim was sitting normally when another woman suddenly assaulted her, turning an everyday commute into a traumatic experience. She also called on local authorities to take responsibility, demanding stronger public safety measures, increased control, and prevention policies to protect passengers on public transportation.
That night was colder than I expected for Valentine's Day. I had stopped by Richard's house to help him with a quick errand before he went to meet Tanya in the plaza. They hadn't been able to see each other because they were too busy, but they wanted to see each other to give each other Valentine's Day gifts and to spend the evening together. He was a nice guy, Richard. He always talked about Tanya as if she was the piece that made his life complete. I never fully understood that relationship, but it wasn't my place to get involved. I didn't want to bother them. I just wanted to accompany my friend, say goodbye to Tanya, and leave. He was excited to surprise her. The walk to the square was quiet. We talked about the usual, sports, work, and stuff like that. Richard was so animated that he didn't even notice how I couldn't help but think how empty the city was for a Sunday night. When we arrived, the place was no different. A few lights illuminated the benches and trees, but there was hardly anyone in sight. Stay a while. You'll keep me company until Tanya arrives. We sat on a bench near the bridge while we waited for Tanya. It was then that everything started to feel weird. The place was empty for a long time. We were talking when I saw it. Someone was coming towards us, but it wasn't Tanya. It was a tall guy wearing a black sports jacket, walking slowly through the trees. There was no reason to notice him at first, but then I realized that his steps were too calculated, as if he didn't want to lose sight of what we were doing. Do you know him? Richard shrugged, playing it down. Probably someone out for a walk. But the man was still there, closer now, pretending to look at his phone as he approached one of the benches. I tried to ignore him. It was easy to think I was overreacting, but my gut kept screaming that something was wrong. Richard, oblivious, pulled out his phone and started texting. He must be letting Tanya know he's arrived, I thought. That's when the guy looked up and his eyes met mine. His expression was scary. He seemed intent on something. He looked at us with a determination that terrified me as he slowly approached us. "What time is it?" His voice was low, almost monotonous. Richard answered but did not get up. I, for my part, preferred not to say anything. The guy stood in front of us for a moment that seemed longer than it was. Then, without another word, he turned and started walking to the other side of the park. But he didn't leave. He just hovered, like a predator waiting for just the right moment to strike. Minutes later, Richard received a phone call from Tanya. He stood up smiling. "I'm going to look for her on the other side of the bridge. Are you coming or staying here?" I had no reason to stay, so I followed him. We walked together down the dark path while I looked out the corner of my eye looking for the guy we had seen earlier. And there he was. He hadn't left. He was still a few meters behind us with his hands in his pockets and his head bowed as if he were trying to go unnoticed. "It's that guy again?" He just laughed. "What do you think he's going to do, rob us? There are two of us. No matter how big he is, he doesn't stand a chance." Richard seemed pretty sure of himself. That's good, because I was not. We got to the bridge, but no one was there. Richard checked his phone, frowning. Tanya said she'd be here. Just then, we heard rapid footsteps behind us. I turned just in time to see the man approaching at full speed. Before I could react, I felt a sharp blow to my head that left me dazed. My vision blurred as I fell to the ground, unable to move. From there, everything became blurry, as if time had slowed down. Still on the ground, I watched as the man grabbed Richard by the neck, throwing him against one of the bridge columns. Richard tried to defend himself, but he didn't have a chance. The guy was stronger, and each blow he gave him was harder and more hateful than the last. I tried to scream, but my voice was barely a whisper. I struggled to get up, but the pain in my head was unbearable. I could only watch as Richard tried to escape, as he tried to use his arms to block the attacks, but the man would not stop. The last blow was the strongest. Richard fell to the ground, and the man pulled something out of his pocket. A gun. He aimed without hesitation and fired several times. Everything went silent after that. I thought he was going to come after me, but instead he put the gun away and looked around. Some people had run out when they heard the gunshots, but no one came back to help. The man was lost in the darkness, leaving Richard lying on the ground. It took me a few minutes to regain my mobility. When I finally got up, I ran to Richard. His body was cold, motionless. There was nothing I could do for him. Sirens began to wail in the distance, but the man was already gone. The police arrived quickly, but their efficiency was questionable. They asked me questions, too many, as I tried to explain what little I had seen. I had no idea who the attacker was or why he had done such a thing. All I knew was that Richard was dead and that nothing would ever be the same. The officers sealed off the area, but the answers didn't come. I felt helpless, carrying guilt that I didn't know if it was mine. Should I have insisted on leaving earlier? Would it have made a difference if I had? It was weeks before anything more was known about the case. The police discovered that the man who killed Richard was not a random stranger. His name was Reginald Coleman, a guy who had been hired by someone close to him to do the dirty work. The revelation came as a rude shock. Tanya had planned the whole thing. She had hired Coleman to get rid of her husband and collect the life insurance. I would have never imagined that someone so close to Richard could betray him like that. What hurt the most was remembering how Richard spoke of Tanya with such love. He had no idea what she was doing behind his back. How she was planning his death while he was trying to surprise her with a gift. Tanya was arrested and convicted, as was Coleman. But that didn't bring justice, at least not for me. Every time I walk by the park, I feel an emptiness in my stomach, a reminder of what happened that night. Richard was a good guy, and he didn't deserve that ending. I keep wondering if I could have done something to prevent it, but I know those questions lead nowhere. All of that remains now are the memories, the scars, and the bitter certainty that some people are capable of the most terrible things for little money. The park is still there, empty, just like that night. Sometimes I think of Richard sitting on that bench, waiting for Tanya, not knowing that his life was about to end. and I wonder if I will ever be able to stop reliving that moment. This story is based on the real case of Reginald Coleman, who was convicted for the murder of Richard Shook on Valentine's Day, 2010. The crime took place at Belton Bridge Park in Hall County, Georgia, where Richard Shook was found shot to death. Investigations revealed that the murder was a result of a contract killing orchestrated by Shook's wife, Tanya Shook, who conspired with her co-worker, Lenitra Ross, and hired Reginald Coleman to carry out the murder. Reginald Coleman was arrested and charged with malice murder and 2 counts related to gun possession in connection with the alleged contract killing. He pleaded guilty to malice murder and was sentenced to life without parole.
My name's Leah. I'm 18, and for the record, I didn't plan any of this. Things just got out of hand. Before it all went to hell, my life was the same as any other girl in Hellman. School, part-time job at the cafe, wasting hours on TikTok like everyone else. My friends and I used to laugh at stupid videos, make dumb lip syncs, and post filters that made us look like someone else. That's how everything started. A stupid app. There was this girl, Dana. Everyone knew her. Tall, perfect hair, the kind of face that got likes no matter what she posted. We were never friends, but she followed me for a while. Then out of nowhere, she blocked me. I didn't even notice until my classmates started asking if I'd seen the account. It was a TikTok page with my name on it, or well, a nickname they made up. They posted videos making fun of me, slow-motion clips from class taken without me noticing, my face distorted, captions saying I looked like a rat. The comments were full of laughing emojis. The username had Dana's style all over it. At first, I thought it would fade away like every other thing online, but it didn't. It got worse. Every day there was a new post. Someone filmed me walking home, eating, even talking to my friends. It felt like the walls of the city were closing in on me. I tried reporting it, but TikTok just sent an automated message. My mom told me to ignore it. My dad said it was just kids being idiots. But it wasn't just that. They were hunting me online. Then came the messages. Anonymous accounts sending me threats. Comments saying things like, "Wait till we see you after school." I knew it was Dana's group. 5 girls, all younger except her. I didn't even know their names. I only knew their laughs. One Friday night, I snapped. I sent a message to Dana on Instagram, told her to stop hiding behind fake accounts. She answered instantly, saying we could talk in person. "Let's clear things up tomorrow, behind the mall." That's where everything went wrong. I got there early. The parking lot was half empty. The wind carried plastic bags and the sound of a bike chain hitting metal. I stood near the fence, trying to act like I wasn't nervous. I kept looking at my phone, pretending I had control. Then they came. All 5 of them. Dana was in the middle, her hair tied up, wearing that smug smile she always had in her videos. The other 4 were holding their phones like they were ready to film a concert. I felt my stomach twist. Dana walked up to me and said it was funny how I thought she'd stop just because I cried about it online. Her friends laughed. I told her I just wanted it to end. She said it would. Then she nodded to one of the girls. They surrounded me. I remember the cold metal of a phone pressed to my face, the red recording light. Someone pushed me from behind. I fell hard. Dana kicked my ribs while the others shouted things I can't forget. They ripped my jacket, grabbed my hair, and pulled. One of them took out scissors. I froze, but my body kept shaking. The sound of hair being cut filled my ears. I tried covering my head, but fists kept coming from every side. Someone screamed, "Get her face! Get it on camera!" When they were done, they left me lying there, blood dripping from my lip, hair scattered on the ground. I saw one of them checking the video, laughing, saying it would go viral. Dana looked down at me and said, "Now you're famous." Then they walked away, I didn't cry. Not there. I just stood up and walked home. Every step burned. My head was buzzing. My mom screamed when she saw me. My dad called the police, but they said they'd investigate. That word meant nothing. 2 days later, the video went up. It had over 100,000 views before I could even report it. Hashtags everywhere. Comments saying I deserved it, that it was just a prank. I stayed in my room for days. Every sound from my phone made my heart race. Then, something inside me changed. I stopped feeling scared. It was like a switch flipped. I started watching the video over and over again, focusing on Dana's face, the way she smiled when she hit me, the sound of her voice echoing in my head. I wanted it gone. I wanted her gone. I started following her TikTok again, but from a fake account. I saw her posting dances, smiling like nothing had happened. The comments were full of hearts, people calling her brave. My stomach twisted every time. I couldn't sleep anymore. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. One night, I went to my dad's tool shed. He fixes bikes sometimes, keeps his tools in perfect order. There was a small hatchet hanging by the window, the kind you use to split wood. My fingers wrapped around the handle before I even thought about it. For days, I carried it in my backpack. I didn't plan anything, at least not consciously. But my body knew something was coming. Every time I saw Dana's face on my screen, I felt closer to doing it. It happened one evening at the park near the school. Dana and her friends were filming another video, music blasting from a speaker. People walking by, laughing, not caring. I walked up slowly, keeping my hood on. My heartbeat felt like gunshots in my chest. When I got close, Dana turned. Her smile froze when she saw me. She started to say something, maybe a joke, but I was already moving. The hatchet hit her shoulder first. I didn't even feel my hand move. The sound it made, dull, wet, cut through the music. She screamed, tried to run, but I pulled it out and swung it again. The others backed away, phones still in their hands, frozen. I hit her again and again until the screaming stopped. Her friends didn't even help her. They just stood there, shaking, some crying. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I dropped the hatchet. My hands were covered in red. For a few seconds, everything was silent, except the music still playing from the speaker. Then I heard people shouting, running. Someone called the police. I didn't move. I looked down at what was left of her face and felt nothing, just empty. The cops dragged me away while everyone filmed. I saw the red recording lights everywhere, the same light from that night behind the mall. It didn't even feel real. It's been 4 months. They keep me in a white room now. I'm not allowed to have anything sharp. They say I'm under observation. The nurses smile at me like I'm a child. I know they've seen the video. Everyone has. They say I'll stay here for a long time. I don't mind. I don't need to go outside anymore. I see everything on the screen they bring me. News reports, reaction videos, people talking about the girl with the hatchet. They debate if I'm a monster or a victim. I watch all of it. Sometimes I hear Dana's voice in the hallway. I know it's not real, but when the lights flicker, I see her standing by the door, her face split open, whispering the same words she said before kicking me. "Now you're famous. And she's right. I am. The following story is inspired by an incident that took place in April 2021 in Helmond, a small town in the south of the Netherlands. The victim was beaten up by 5 of her schoolmates after they created a hate account on TikTok to mock her. While they were beating her, others recorded everything on their phones. The victim fell to the ground and suffered a skull contusion, severe bruising, and a concussion. She was hospitalized but survived. The video circulated among teenagers in the neighborhood and then reached the police. The attackers were arrested and released into the custody of their parents. Their identities are kept anonymous.
My name is Sarah Clark, and my mother Annabeth worked as a clerk and security screener at the Louisiana courthouse for almost all her life. Growing up, we could never really afford much, but thanks to the courthouse director, Charles Barton, my mother was able to get a job. After working there for 40 years, she passed away in 2021 from an illness, and Charles quickly offered me the job, despite the fact that I was already in my mid-20s and doing well for myself. I understood my mom's loss was hard for Charles, and I agreed to fill in for a couple of weeks, if only to keep him company. My first day was on the 5th of November 2024. While I wasn't up to speed on many things, most of the job didn't need to be explained to me, as I'd spent endless hours behind the bulletproof glass with my mom, watching monitors and checking strangers' IDs throughout the day. On average, we only had 2 or 3 people come into the courthouse every day. But by the time it was 4:30 p.m., no one had come in, and I had begun checking the cameras and the documents one last time in preparation to leave at 5. Surprisingly, at around 4:50 p.m., I heard the doors swing open and close, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. I looked up to see a man in his early 20s. He was dressed in a white shirt with a dark hoodie and black pants and introduced himself as Jason. He appeared soft-spoken and well-mannered at first. As he told me, his dad had racked up a couple of fines and he was here to clear them up before he got into some real trouble. I noticed his eyes kept darting back and forth nervously, but this seemed like a sweet gesture, and I completely understood why he'd be nervous doing what he was doing. I needed a little bit more information to help him out, so I said, "Okay, let me just look that up for you. What state did he get all these fines in?" He replied saying, "Right here, ma'am, Louisiana." I put it in and asked the next question. "Now tell me, are we talking about a particular area, driving indecency, or is it all over the place?" Again, he responded quickly, "All over the place." "Okay, well, last thing I need from you is your dad's name." This time he answered just as fast, but there was a difference in the tone of his voice. "Martin Rogan." I typed in the name and was immediately filled with utter confusion. The name Martin Rogan only had one entry in Louisiana for fines, and as far as either of us was concerned, Martin couldn't have been the young man's father as he had no leftover fines, no records of relatives, and most importantly, Martin Rogan had been dead since 1919. I stared at the screen for a few minutes before trying again. Maybe there was someone I missed, but there wasn't, and so I asked again, "Are you sure the name you gave is correct?" The boy nodded, and I responded saying, "Sorry, but there's no record of Martin Rogan in here. Maybe your dad's already paid." Before I could finish the sentence, Jason cut me off abruptly saying, "Sorry, I meant Alex. My dad's name is Alex Rogan." At this point, I could tell he was lying and paranoid, but there was no real cause for alarm. So I said, "Okay, listen, sir. I don't know if you're just messing around or if you're on something, but so I'll ask you to respect it." Once I was done, the whole tone of the situation changed, as Jason didn't say anything back, but instead stared at me through the glass without bother, paranoia, or any of the other emotions he'd shown earlier that day. His eyes looked stale and dead, and in a freakishly calm voice he said, "I know you have some cash in the register. Give it to me, and I won't cut your neck open and watch you die like a dog." I stayed frozen, partly out of fear and partly out of utter confusion, as I couldn't understand how the man's attitude could change so quickly and drastically. I began thinking he couldn't be serious, and I asked myself questions like, Why would he rob a courthouse and not some local store like the rest of the criminals? Was he not seeing the bulletproof glass standing between me and whatever plans he had? Finally, after a few seconds of initial shock, I responded saying, "I'm not sure you know what you're saying, sir." Once again, the man cut me off suddenly. His eyes turned red and veins bulged in his neck as he slammed the glass, saying, "Listen here, you bitch. I know exactly what I said, and I'll say it again. Open the fucking door and hand me the money, or else I'll come in there and cut you like a fish." I hit the alarm button and was immediately filled with regret and fear. The man let out a blood-curdling scream, and before I knew it, he punched at the glass so hard, blood and pieces of skin were left over. After that, he punched at it again, this time harder and bloodier, and despite the fact that the glass in front of me was literally meant to stop bullets, I found myself shaking in fear, as I knew the man wasn't going to stop until he'd gotten through. It all happened in a few seconds, but at the time, it felt like hours, and while I prayed the cops would get there in time, my hopes were immediately dashed, as the man struck the glass again and again before breaking through it with his head and squeezing into the room. I screamed in horror and attempted to run out of the door and escape. Honestly, it was a worthless attempt, and before I could get far, the man grabbed onto me from behind, shoved something sharp deep into my back, and pushed me to the floor violently. I let out a scream as I fell, and eventually, screams turned into tears, and I felt around my back for what he stabbed me with as he searched my desk and took the money from the drawer. Once he was done, the man forced me to my feet, taking a knife out of my back and pushing me back into the room. After that, he was gone, and I lay still on the floor as blood pooled slowly around me. The lights dimmed, and I wondered if I'd die, and what the odds were that this happened to me on my first day taking over for my mom. Soon enough, I began slipping in and out of consciousness, until finally it all got dark. I woke up 2 days later at the East Louisiana State Hospital, and after the doctors gave me the rundown, Charles came in crying, and after apologizing for what seemed like forever, he told me the police were on their way with news about the case. By the time they arrived at 4 p.m. that day, they told me they'd caught the guy, and despite how surreal what I experienced felt like, the police told me it was all as simple as a criminal trying to get some money and thinking hitting up a courthouse would be easier than a bank. Investigations were still going on about how he was able to break through the security glass, but it wasn't a special plan. The man wasn't a psychopathic mastermind, and what had happened to me that day happened to thousands of people every day and will continue to happen to people around the world. That day changed my life forever, and it all happened in a second for reasons as simple as money. That was what haunted me the most and will continue to haunt my dreams for years.
It was a cold November morning in Perugia when I woke up to the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but watchful. The street outside was still. No clatter of scooters, no shouts from the corner cafe. Just a pale gray light filtering through my curtains and the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I padded out into the hallway, my bare feet on the cold tile, the air faintly smelling of damp stone and laundry powder. Meredith's door was shut. That wasn't unusual, but something about it felt heavier than normal, like the air on that side of the hall had thickened. I called her name softly, more out of habit than concern, and got no answer. In the bathroom, a small streak of blood marked the side of the sink. Just a smear, as if someone had wiped their finger across it. My first thought was that Meredith had cut herself shaving, but the coppery smell lingered just a second too long. The front door was ajar, only by an inch, but enough for a draft to slip in. I frowned and shut it. I remember thinking maybe one of the others had gone out and forgotten to close it fully. The place was quiet, though. Amanda's room was empty. I poured myself some water, trying not to think about the blood in the sink. The glass was cold in my hand, and as I drank, I could hear faint footsteps above, or maybe just the creak of the old beams. By mid-morning, Amanda and Raphael were back. They moved through the kitchen talking low, their words too soft to catch, their expressions tight but not fearful. When I asked if they'd seen Meredith, Amanda shrugged, eyes darting to Raphael before saying she hadn't. There was an awkward pause. Then they started tidying the kitchen together, like they were distracting themselves. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't name it. Maybe it was the way Raphael didn't look at me in the eye, or the way Amanda's laugh came too quickly when I joked about the murderous Perugia draft from the open door. It was around lunchtime when I decided to call Meredith. The phone rang and rang. No answer. I sent her a text message. "Hey, you around? The door was open this morning." Still nothing. My stomach felt tight. Amanda suggested we check her room. We knocked. No reply. The handle wouldn't turn. It was locked. I remember pressing my ear to the wood, straining to hear movement. Nothing. Just silence. Deep and absolute. Amanda called the police, telling them there might have been a break-in. The officers arrived quickly. 2 local men in dark uniforms, their boots loud on the tile. They noticed the broken window in one of the other rooms, glass scattered across the floor. One of them frowned at the lock on Meredith's door and asked if we had a spare key. We didn't. They called in someone to force it open. I stood in the hallway, the walls pressing in, my breath shallow. Amanda had stepped back, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Raphael was watching the floor. I heard the splinter of wood as the door gave way, and then nothing. Just a heavy pause. The first officer didn't speak right away. He froze in the doorway, his shoulders tense. Then he turned his head slightly and muttered something in Italian, low and sharp. I stepped forward before he could stop me. The room was dim, the shutters half closed, the air cold. Meredith was on the floor, her body twisted, partially covered by a duvet. There was so much red. Not fresh, bright red, but dark, clotted patches staining the sheets, the pillow, her hair. The metallic smell hit me like a slap strong enough to taste. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and there was something about the way her arm was bent that made my knees weaken. I backed out, the edges of my vision swimming. The officers moved quickly then, speaking into radios, their voices clipped and urgent. One of them herded us into the kitchen. Amanda sat at the table, staring at her hands. Raphael leaned against the counter, chewing his lip. I couldn't look at either of them. Outside, the sky had turned the color of wet cement. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. The cold seeped in through the glass window, and I realized I was still barefoot. I could hear more footsteps now, heavier ones, more officers arriving. As they moved in and out, I caught fragments of their words. Coltellate, assassino. The words landed in my gut like stones. Murder. Stabbing. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a stranger slipping in for a quick theft. I thought about the blood in the sink that morning, the open door, the way Amanda had laughed too quickly, the silence behind Meredith's door. I thought about how close I had been to her all night, just a thin wall between us, while something unthinkable happened on the other side. When they finally let us go outside, the courtyard was crowded with uniforms and neighbors craning their necks. The November air was sharp in my lungs. I stood by the gate, looking back up at our windows, the one with the broken glass, the one still closed tight behind shutters. Even now, I can hear the hollow sound of the door giving way, the stillness that followed. The weight of that room pressing into me before I even saw her, and I can't stop thinking. The signs were there, in the smallest details, and I walked right past them. I was supposed to be boxing up my uncle's things. Nothing special, just old tools, some dusty books, and half-rotted junk in his garage. He died 2 months earlier. Everyone said suicide, hung himself in the basement. But even then, I didn't believe it. Not with the bruises they'd ignored. Not with the way the lock on the inside of the door was shattered. I found the USB drive taped under the bottom drawer of his old workbench. Black, no markings. Nothing else in that drawer but dead spiders and rusty screws. I put it in my pocket without thinking. It felt out of place, like someone wanted it hidden, but not destroyed, like it was waiting. That night I was alone. My mom was passed out on the couch. I plugged it into my laptop in my room. Only one file. Cypherdoor.exe. The icon was blank. Just a red dot in the center. I double-clicked. It launched a browser window that didn't look like any browser I'd ever seen. No URL bar, no controls, just a login screen and a single clickable link under it. Recover account. No text field, no buttons, just that one option pulsing softly like it was breathing. I stared at it for a full minute. There was no back button, no way to close the window. Not even a task manager could kill the process. The cursor stayed locked to the window. I didn't click because I wanted to. I clicked because it felt like I had to. The second I did, my phone rang. Unknown number. No ringtone, just loud static. I froze, but answered. "Welcome back, Jonah." The voice was calm, steady, but wrong. It sounded like someone talking through a translator, slightly off, like each word was stitched from 100 voices. "It's time, friend." I didn't say anything. My mouth went dry. They knew exactly where I was. Before I could hang up, the call ended. My hands were shaking when I looked back at the screen. It wasn't a login page anymore. It had opened into a full dashboard, black background, blood-red text. No usernames, no icons, just rows of threads with labels like coordinates, dates, and timestamps. The kind of things you'd expect on surveillance software, not a forum. Each entry had a link. Most said video active. I clicked on one. A dim room. A man tied to a chair, screaming into a cloth gag. For 30 seconds he struggled. Then someone walked into frame and turned off the light. Window instantly. The top of the page updated in real time. My IP address appeared in red. Account restored, session active. I hadn't typed anything, but it knew I was there. I scrolled down. There were folders titled Contributions, Witnessed Events, Legacy Access. The last folder had 5 items, all of them tagged Exit Attempt, Failure. I clicked the 4th one. The video opened fast, no loading. My uncle's face filled the screen. His hands were zip-tied. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. He was whispering something like a prayer. Then a figure stepped into view dressed in black, wearing a mask like a smooth oval. No mouth, no eyes, just a slit running vertically down the center. The figure raised a syringe. The video cut off just as it touched his neck. A new thread appeared instantly, time-stamped for that exact moment. Viewer, Jonah R. logged. That's when I knew I wasn't just watching. I was part of it now. The feed flickered, and for a second my webcam light turned on. I didn't even think. I slammed my laptop shut, but I knew it was too late. I didn't sleep that night. Every few minutes, I thought I heard tapping on my window, but when I checked, there was nothing there. My phone stayed on airplane mode, but at exactly 3:11 a.m., it lit up. No number again, just one notification. Live post created. Jonah R. Feed active. The message came with a link. Against every instinct, I clicked it. My webcam turned on instantly. There was no time to react, no settings, no confirmation. It streamed me directly to the site. I was the post. I unplugged the laptop, tore out the battery, but the screen stayed on. My face was still there. In the corner, a timer was counting down. It was at 000958. And underneath, session lock, final. That's when the whispering started. Not from the laptop, from inside the room. It was low at first, like someone trying to speak through water. I checked the closet. Empty. Then under the bed. Nothing. I stood up and the lights went out. The screen glowed brighter in the dark, my own face staring back at me. But it wasn't a sync anymore. The feed was lagging. My mouth didn't move, but the reflection did. It smiled. Then, the whispering stopped. There was someone in the house. I heard the back door unlock. Not break, unlock. Like someone already had a key. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a broken desk lamp, and backed into the hallway. I heard footsteps, not heavy, just the sound of bare feet dragging slightly across wood. Slow, deliberate. I crept down the stairs, trying not to breathe too loud, but every creak of the wood echoed like a scream. When I reached the bottom, the kitchen lights were flickering. That's when I saw him. The same figure from the video. The mask with the slit. Only now it moved. The slit twitched open. A wet, gurgling breath slipped out. He didn't run. He didn't even lunge. He just started walking toward me, step by step, with a slit in his face expanding into a jagged hole. Inside, something twitched like tongues or fingers. I ran. I didn't care where. I bolted through the living room, slammed the door to the basement, and threw a shelf in front of it. I was panting, barely thinking. That's when I looked up and saw the screen. My uncle's old computer was still on. The same browser. The same site. But this time the thread title was different. Replacement confirmed. The screen showed a split feed. On one side, my uncle was tied to a chair. On the other, my own hallway. Live. The figure was already on the stairs. I tried to break the basement window. The figure was at the door now, slowly moving the shelf aside with inhuman calm. Not brute force, just patience. It had done this 100 times. I grabbed a crowbar and stood back. The second the door opened, I swung. It hit his arm, but he didn't react. His fingers latched onto the bar and pulled it from my hands like I was a child. He tilted his head once, then raised the needle. I didn't feel the needle. I just remember the cold metal against my neck and the way the world snapped sideways. But I didn't pass out. I panicked. I threw my weight forward, slammed past him, and crashed through the basement window. The glass tore my shoulder open. I landed hard on the concrete outside. My leg bent wrong. I screamed and crawled. He followed. Didn't rush, just climbed out through the broken window like it wasn't a problem. I dragged myself through the glass, covered in blood and glass, screaming for help. He didn't speak, didn't run, just walked after me. When I looked back, the slit in the mask was wide open. Something inside it was moving, shifting like fingers and tongues pushing against the edges. I made it to the front yard before he stopped. He just stood there on the lawn, head tilted like a confused animal. Then he turned around and walked back into the house, calm, silent, like he'd finished his part. A second later, the lights in the house all shut off at once. The cops showed up 5 minutes later. My neighbor must have heard me. They found the man inside, still sitting in the basement. Said he was drugged out of his mind, barely breathing. No ID, no explanation. The report said, home invasion. No mention of the mask, no mention of the live stream. My laptop was gone. Since then, people show up outside my house. Different ones every time. Just standing there, staring. They never come in. They don't talk, but they move things. I wake up and furniture is flipped. Drawers are empty. Doors unlocked. Sometimes they leave items. A shoe on the kitchen counter. A photo from my childhood. A blood-stained fork. It's not about killing me. It's about showing me that I can't stop them. That I'm not safe anywhere. They did the same thing to my uncle, and no one believed him either. They don't need to break in. They already have keys. Working the day shift at Wendy's wasn't much better than the night shift. It was quieter, sure, but the monetary was the same. When everything happened, I just finished wiping down the counters when the automatic door slid open with a low hum. A couple walked in. A woman clutching a large purse looked nervous. Her eyes darted around the restaurant as if she was looking for an escape route. The man with her was built like a linebacker. His face looked in an expression of barely contained rage. His eyes swept over the empty tables and landed on me. His glare sent a chill down my spine. The woman shuffled to the counter, her shoulders hunched. The man followed close behind, towering over her, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. I could feel the tension between them, even before anyone said a word. The woman stepped forward hesitantly, her voice shaky and almost too quiet to hear.
I'll take a number 3 combo, medium fries and a small drink.
The man's face twisted into a scowl, and his voice exploded like a gunshot.
What did I tell you? I said large fries.
She flinched at his words, her lips trembling. She turned to him, speaking just loud enough for me to catch.
I don't have enough money for a large. I brought just enough for what we agreed on.
His fist clenched, and he took a step closer to her, towering over her.
You're useless. Always making excuses. Can't even get an order right.
She looked absolutely terrified, so I stepped in, trying to break the growing tension. Sir, you shouldn't be. He turned to face me, his face red with fury. Without a word, he shoved me so hard that I crashed into the wall behind the counter. My shoulder throbbed, but I forced myself back to my feet. The woman's face was pale, her hands trembling as she tried to calm him down.
Please don't. Don't start a fight. Everyone is looking. You're embarrassing me.
He rounded on her again, his voice even louder now.
Embarrassing you. You are embarrassing yourself. This is all your fault. Look what you made me do. Are you happy now?
I could see where this was heading. His rage was spiraling out of control. He was a bomb waiting to go off. The woman's pleas only seemed to fuel his anger further. When she reached out to touch his arm, he swatted her hand away so hard that she stumbled back a step. I grabbed the phone behind the counter, my fingers fumbling to dial the police. Before I could press the button, he lunged over the counter, grabbing my wrist in a vice grip.
What do you think you're doing?
You're not going anywhere. I yanked my hand away, but he reached across the counter and dragged me forward, slamming me against the register. He started hitting me and never stopped. Again and again and again and again. He was hitting me non-stop, and I couldn't defend myself. And even though there were people in the place, no one tried to stop him. Everyone was too afraid. Pain shot through my ribs as I struggled to push him off. His face was inches from mine, his breath hot and reeking of stale cigarettes. My co-workers were calling the police, but nobody was doing anything to save me. The woman screamed, begging him to stop, but he ignored her. He let go of me, only to grab a metal napkin holder and hurl it across the room. It shattered against the wall with a deafening crash. He turned his attention to the tables next, flipping them over one by one with a guttural roar. The sound of plastic and metal hitting the floor echoed through the empty restaurant. I tried to crawl toward the kitchen, hoping to grab something, anything to defend myself. But he was faster. He crossed the room in just a few strides, grabbing me by the collar and yanking me off the ground. My feet barely touched the floor as he shook me like a rag doll. You think you're tough, huh? Say something now. I could barely get a word out before he threw me to the floor again. My head smacked against the tile, and for a moment, everything was a blur. I could hear the woman's voice frantic and desperate, but her words were drowned out by his shouting. When I managed to sit up, he was already tearing the place apart. Chairs flew across the room, one of them smashing into the glass window near the entrance. I saw the kitchen knife then, lying on the floor where it had fallen during the chaos. My heart sank as I watched him notice it too. He picked up the knife, holding it tightly in his hand. The woman tried to grab his arm, but he shoved her so hard she fell to the ground, clutching her side. He turned back to me. He wanted to kill me. He advanced slowly on me, the knife held low but ready. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes wild and unfocused. I scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. My back hit the counter, and I was trapped. Still want to play the hero? Let's see how brave you are now. The door opened, and I saw 2 police officers rush in, their guns drawn. They shouted at him to drop the knife, their voices steady but commanding. For a moment he froze, his grip on the knife tightening. His eyes darted between me and the officers as if he was trying to decide his next move. The woman screamed at him to stop, tears streaming down her face. But he didn't seem to hear her. He raised the knife slightly. He wanted to kill me anyway. He didn't care about the police. I braced myself, thinking this was it. But before he could make another move, one of the officers tackled him from behind. The knife clattered to the floor as they wrestled him to the ground. It took both officers to pin him down. I sat on the floor, my chest heaving, watching as they cuffed him. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck as he continued to trash-talk me. The woman was sobbing uncontrollably, her hands covering her face. One of the officers helped her to her feet, speaking to her in a low, calming voice. Another officer came over to me, checking if I was hurt. My ribs ached, my lip was split, and my head was pounding. But I was alive. That was all that mattered. The officers told me later that he'd been high on some synthetic drug that made people violent and nearly unstoppable. It took 3 of them to get him into the squad car. That was my last day at Wendy's. I handed in my resignation the next morning. I couldn't walk back into that place. Couldn't stand the thought of reliving those moments every time I saw the counter or the floor where it all happened. I still think about it sometimes. The knife, the rage in his eyes, the sound of chairs crashing to the ground. And every time I hear someone say fast food is an easy job, I remember that day. They have no idea how bad it can get.
This story is inspired by a real case. In this story, a white male about 25 years old walked into a Wendy's with his girlfriend. After an employee noticed how he mistreated the woman, he tried to intercede, only to be brutally beaten by the man, who was later arrested.
In my 30 years as a doctor in this hospital, you can imagine that I have seen all kinds of things. Patients fighting for their lives, and others who no longer wanted to live. I saw violent families demanding that we do something more to save their family members, and people completely abandoned. Being a doctor is a difficult job, and only experience prepares you to be one. But there was a time when nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Something so strange and out of this world, I can't put into words. That day, I saw evil in its purest state right in its eyes, and it looked back at me. It all started with a patient who had arrived a few days before. She was in intensive care, getting better. The day she was brought in, she had a lot of bruises and fractures in her body. Initially, we thought she had suffered domestic violence, but she was not in a relationship, and when a neighbor told the police about the noises, they found her at home with the door closed, alone. Maybe when she woke up, she was going to give us the answers to so many questions that we had been developing during these days. At that time, I can't say that I was an experienced doctor, but with a little more than 5 years of experience, I could say that I knew my way around the hospital. And that's why I can say that one day when I was doing night rounds at the hospital, I saw something that I don't think many other doctors have seen. I was in the room with one of my patients behind me. I had the strange sensation that someone had walked down the hallway. Hello, is somebody there? Hey, did you see someone behind me? I'm the only doctor around.
Lo he visto. Era un demonio. Te estaba mirando.
Sorry, I don't speak Spanish.
A demon. Demon behind.
What? Did he just say there was a demon behind me? That was weird. The man only had a broken leg and even thought I understood half of what he said. We had a talk a few seconds ago and he seemed in his senses. Now, he just seemed bothered. Like he saw the face of the devil itself behind me. I have to admit, that really scared me.
Demon, don't go. It was a demon. Red eyes and smile.
Hey, take it easy. It could be a lost patient. I have to check it out. Be right back, okay? And just like that, I left my patient. I ran quickly to the door, but when I saw the hallway, it was empty. Maybe he was gone. It may seem illogical, but I felt that something bad was happening. It was something I couldn't see or put into words, but it was as real as anything you are seeing right now. The hallway filled with an almost Gaelic code. I felt the urge to leave, but I couldn't do it. I felt that someone was in danger and that I had to do something. I started to walk down the hallway, and the code was getting more and more intense. I resisted my impulse to leave as fast as I can and kept walking until I reached the girl's room. Her door was open and her lights were on. I had a troubling feeling about her. I felt she was in danger, so I tried to enter her room, but something didn't want me to. The door slammed violently in my face. Was that the wind? No, impossible. There are no windows open and the whole movement was way too violent. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The girl woke up screaming in terror. Her eyes were wide open. She began to inspect her surroundings, lost. Suddenly, she saw something that terrified her. What was there? I couldn't see a thing. The girl got out of bed and tried to run, but she didn't know she was in a cast, so she fell to the floor. Meanwhile, I was pounding on the door as hard as I could. It was as if the weak bedroom doors were suddenly reinforced. The woman crawled against the wall, away from someone I couldn't see, but it was there. The girl began to feel pressure on her neck, and stuck against the wall, she was floating. She was fighting for her life, fighting to breathe. From behind the door, I could see how her arms and legs were breaking on their own, and from one second to the next, her neck snapped.
the girl fell lifeless to the floor. The door to her room opened and I rushed in. I stared in disbelief at what had happened. She was dead. This wasn't an accident or suicide. Somebody actually killed her. This didn't make any sense, and I refused to believe that there was something paranormal happening. But suddenly, I felt someone behind me. When I turned around, I saw it. A black figure more than 2 meters tall was staring at me. Its body was slender but imposing, and its eyes were red with the most intense fire I had ever seen in my life. I closed my eyes in disbelief, and when I opened them again, there was no one there. At that moment, I felt someone grab me by the neck and throw me against the wall of the hallway. I tried to get up, but the invisible being kicked me in the face and started stepping on my face as if I were a cockroach. I stood up and ran as fast as I could. As I did so, I heard mocking laughter from behind me, slowly fading into the echo of the huge hospital. It was never determined what had happened to the girl. The footage had disappeared, and although I was a suspect for a short time, the police concluded that I had nothing to do with it. I never saw anything remotely paranormal in the hospital again, but there is not a night that goes by that I don't hear that laughter in the hospital. That mocking, provocative laugh sounds like a reminder that I couldn't save that girl that day.
My name is Rachel. I worked as a 911 operator until everything collapsed because of one mistake I can't erase. I was trained to handle emergencies, but the truth is that after years of picking up calls, you start treating people like background noise. I convinced myself that I was immune, that I could judge what mattered and what didn't. That night, I proved how wrong I was. The room was quiet, a slow shift with barely any calls. I leaned back in my chair, half listening to the operators around me as they talked about nothing important. I wasn't focused, wasn't ready. The call came in and I answered without even straightening my back. A woman's voice came through the line. It was trembling, fast, desperate. The kind of voice you can barely understand because panic makes words stumble. I should have taken it seriously from the first second. Instead, I spoke to her like I was bored. That single choice stayed with me forever. Her name was Jessica. She whispered that her husband had been beating her for months, and that night he had locked their daughter in the bedroom. I heard the way her breath kept breaking between words, but I still acted like I needed confirmation, like she might be exaggerating. She said he was drunk, that he had something heavy in his hand, and that she didn't think she would make it through the night. My system showed the address. I could have dispatched a unit immediately. Instead, I pressed her for details, asking questions that wasted time. The sound on the line shifted. Her voice lowered further, almost impossible to hear, and she said he was coming back into the room. She begged me to send help fast. I told her to calm down. I told her to call back if it got worse. Then the line went dead. I logged the call as domestic disturbance, low threat. That entry sealed her fate. 2 days later, I saw the footage. A neighbor had filmed it through a window, the video shaky and blurred. Jessica ran barefoot across the yard, dragging her little girl with both hands. Her face was twisted in terror, her steps clumsy like she barely had control of her body. Behind them, a man burst out of the house with a tool in his hand. He caught up to her before she reached the fence. The clip ended there. The news confirmed she was dead, and her daughter was in foster care. The audio of the call leaked. It spread across news channels and social media. I listened to my own voice dismissing her over and over while people online screamed for my blood. They called me a murderer, a failure, a monster. The department fired me and left me to rot. I thought the shame was unbearable, until the letters started. The first one slid under my door,
It said, "You killed my sister." No name, no explanation, just that sentence written in marker. The next one came 2 days later. "You will beg like she begged." The moment I read that, I couldn't breathe properly. Every noise in my apartment made me jump. I began hearing steps in the hallway at night. Sometimes I thought someone was standing outside my door, waiting. I forced myself to believe it was paranoia, until the third letter arrived. The one that said, "When I see your fear, I will see hers again." The words made me shake because they weren't just threats. They were personal, filled with grief, twisted into rage. I realized Jessica had a brother, and he had decided I was going to pay for her death. The harassment grew worse each night. My phone rang at random hours, and the silence on the other end felt heavier than screams. Knocks at my door came at 3 a.m., soft at first, then harder, always stopping before I could open it. One night I heard something scraping against my window. I lived on the second floor. I pressed myself against the wall, listening to the squeal of metal dragging against glass. When I turned the light on, it stopped, but I knew someone had been there. I carried a kitchen knife everywhere inside the apartment. My hand shook whenever I held it, and I hated how powerless I felt. But there was no choice. I had no job, no money, nowhere to go. The world outside had turned its back on me, and inside these walls I was hunted. The breaking point came when I stepped outside for groceries. Across the lot, a man leaned against a car, watching me. His head tilted just slightly, and I felt his stare digging into me. I dropped the bags and ran back upstairs. That night, he spoke under my window.
"Her screams echo every time I close my eyes. You will give me that same echo before I end you."
I barely slept after that. Every sound in the building felt like him moving closer. I sat by the door, gripping the knife, my chest burning from the tension. The attack didn't creep, it exploded. A crash of glass shattered the kitchen, and I heard heavy steps rushing through my apartment. His breathing was rough, animalistic, filled with hatred. I stumbled into my bedroom and locked the door, my heart hammering like it would rip through my chest. He pounded against the door, each hit splintering the wood. His voice roared through the cracks.
"You sat there while she begged. You let her die alone. I hear her in my head every night. And tonight, I'll hear you."
I pressed the knife against my leg, but my hand shook so much I thought I'd stab myself. The frame was breaking. I knew the door wouldn't last. I forced myself to grab the phone and dial 911. My voice was a broken mess when the operator answered. The woman on the line didn't dismiss me. She didn't waste a second. She told me to stay low, to keep the phone near, to breathe slower so he wouldn't hear me. Her voice stayed calm while the wood cracked behind me. The door burst open. He rushed in, his eyes wide, his face twisted, not only in rage, but in grief. In his hand, he gripped a heavy wrench, swinging it high. He looked at me like I was Jessica, like by hurting me he could bring her final moments back and change them.
"You don't deserve to breathe when she's in the ground."
Before he brought the weapon down, the flashlight beam of officers cut through the room. Shouts filled the air. They tackled him, wrestling the wrench away as he screamed my name like it burned in his throat. They dragged him out while he cursed me, swearing he could still hear Jessica in my voice. I later learned his name was Alan, Jessica's brother. He died that night after attacking officers at the station. His rage was consuming him, even in his last moments. I survived, but the world doesn't mean what it used to. I live with the weight of Jessica's voice, with the image of her running across that yard replaying in my head, and with the memory of her brother's eyes staring at me like I was the murderer he needed to destroy. The little girl was adopted. I saw a photo of her months later, smiling beside strangers who would never know what she had lived through. I hope she never learns my role in it. Sometimes I listen to the audio of my own call. The night I begged for help while the door broke down. I hear the operator guiding me, treating me with the urgency I once denied another woman. That voice kept me alive. That voice did for me what I failed to do for Jessica.
It happened about 8 years ago. I was in my 4th and final year of college, and all I could think about at that time was partying. I wasn't what you would call a typical college student, as while most of my friends found a good balance between studying and partying, I spent all my time in bars, clubs, basically any place the party was. At that time, all my friends used to call me Trevor the Party Monster. I carried that title like a badge of honor, as I made sure I was always the first person at every party, event, or get-together that was going on. Don't get me wrong, I didn't just party for the sake of it, and it wasn't because I didn't like to study. I partied because it made me feel free, and I was happiest whenever I was jumping up and down to some loud music with a drink in my hand. However, the freedom I felt from partying all the time turned into nothing but crippling fear after my fateful experience at the Midnight Bar. It was the 23rd of November 2015. I'd gotten a text earlier that day saying there was going to be a lit party at the Midnight Bar. I'd been to basically every single bar in my vicinity at that point, but I'd never heard of the Midnight Bar before. I assumed it was a new place that had just opened up, and this party was their attempt to get some publicity. Since they were a new bar, I didn't really know the people behind the party, but just like every party I heard about, I didn't hesitate to go. I started my preparations by telling all my friends where the party was located. I then called my friend Jimmy, who was a DJ, and I told him to get his set ready, as I had already talked to some people to get him to play the music at the party. After that, I called my drug guy, Nash, to get some pills that we could party hard with. There were a few other things that I had to do after my calls, but soon enough, all the preparations were done, and I made my way to the Midnight Bar. The turnout was huge, as I really got the word out there. By the time I arrived, most of my friends were already there, so I joined them. We ordered shot after shot as we started to party hard. Nash had gotten us a wide variety of recreational drugs like LSD, Molly, and angel dust, PCP. There were also some magic mushrooms and vitamin K, ketamine. We each took a small dose of our picks to take the party to another level. I was having the time of my life at that point. The music was blaring, I had a beer in my hand, and I was dancing my heart out. I told myself that things couldn't get any better than this, but that's when I saw her. I can never forget how entranced I was by her eyes. She was beautiful. I watched her as she danced, and I admired every swish and sway her body made. It felt like I was under a spell as my body moved towards her without hesitating. When I reached where she was, I said, "Hi, I'm Trevor. I think you're beautiful." She laughed before responding with, "Hey, I'm Sandra Hale, and I know who you are. You're Trevor Mount, the party monster. Your reputation precedes you." I then smiled and said, "I didn't know drinking booze could make me famous." We both laughed at my joke before Sandra asked, "Do you want to dance?" That was all I wanted at that point, so I immediately said yes. We spent the entire party together from there. We danced, took some more shots, and party drugs. I was enjoying myself, and I could tell Sandra was also having fun. We'd really hit it off as we enjoyed the party. Now, I don't know why I did this. I'm guessing it's because I was so excited at that point, but I took my shirt off and I kissed Sandra. She kissed me back, and it felt like I was on top of the world. I was going to kiss her again when one of my friends, Brian, who was passing by with a camera around his neck, told me and Sandra to smile for a picture. We both looked at the camera for the picture to be taken. Sandra was behind me, and I was up front. I then heard Brian say, "Smile, Trevor," but before he could take the picture, everything went quiet. For some reason, I couldn't hear the loud blaring music anymore. At first, I thought something was wrong with my ears because I was sure they didn't stop playing the music as I was just hearing it a few seconds ago. My loss of hearing wasn't the only odd thing that was happening, as I realized that I couldn't move my body anymore. It felt like time had stopped for me, and things just got worse from there as I watched Sandra's lower jaw expand to an inhumane level and how her now lengthy tongue rolled onto my skin. Horrified, I tried to scream, but I couldn't move my mouth. My brain tried to make sense of everything as I asked myself why I was frozen in place and why Sandra had now turned into something that looked like it crawled out of hell. As I felt her tongue on my skin, an unimaginable pain rippled through my body. I don't know really how to explain it, but it felt like I was dying and my life was being sucked away by Sandra's morbidly long tongue on my skin. I don't know how long it lasted, but it could have been an hour or two. Soon, everything around me started to get blurry, and eventually, it all went dark. I woke up in the hospital a few hours later, surrounded by a doctor and my friends. They told me that I'd passed out from dehydration and the mixing of hard drugs with alcohol. I was still scared of the horrific things I'd experienced, so I started to tell them what happened with Sandra, but my friend Brian, who rushed me to the hospital, told me that there was no one named Sandra at the party. Shocked, I told him that was impossible, and I asked Brian about the picture he took. Brian then told me that I was alone when the picture was taken. Frustrated that no one was listening to me, coupled with the fact that they were all looking at me like I was crazy, I started to scream and cry at the same time. I remember screaming the words, "She was real! Sandra was real, and she's a monster! She's a demon!" I was soon subdued and given a sedative that calmed me down. I spent another 2 days in the hospital as they wanted to check if everything was all right with my head. No one believed me. All the doctors said I'd hallucinated what I saw due to the hallucinogenic drugs I'd taken, but I knew that wasn't true. I had made sure to take the drugs in small doses during the party, so it was hard to believe that I hallucinated something that lucid. Plus, I never had an episode like this ever since I started doing recreational drugs. I told the doctors this, hoping they would believe me, and even though they confirmed that I'd taken the drugs in small doses, they told me that there was no other possible explanation to what I'd seen. My only hope now was the picture Brian took, but whenever I show the people the picture Brian had taken, they tell me that they can only see me in the image. Things just got stranger from there, as anytime I look at the picture, I can still see her behind me. I don't know why I was the only one who could see Sandra in the photo, but it drove me crazy and I had to undergo some serious therapy. It's been a long time since this happened, but I still haven't forgotten that incident. I have my theories as I look into the morbid experience to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. It was hard, but I finally found 2 people, a man in Slovakia and another man in Greece, who said they'd experienced something similar at a strange bar in their countries. At the end of my research, I believed the woman called Sandra Hale was a succubus, a female demon who seduces men and feeds on their life force for sustenance. And the only thing I have to prove it is this picture. I've tried time and time again to get people to believe me, but no one does, as they all say, I'm not right in the head. So I decided to put my story out there. This entire incident has also put me off parties, especially the ones held in bars. So be careful out there, as you never know if it's your favorite bar, where the actual party monsters like Sandra are lurking. I moved in a few weeks ago. It's a 1-bedroom apartment, 2nd floor, old building. Nothing fancy. It came semi-furnished, which meant I didn't have to worry about buying a couch, a bed, or even a microwave. Rent was cheap, and the neighborhood was quiet. Maybe too quiet. I live alone, just me and my cat, Baxter. He's about 6 years old, gray with black stripes, and usually pretty calm. He took the move well, but since day one, he's avoided the living room. More specifically, the couch in the living room. At first, I thought maybe there was a smell or something stuck in the fabric. I checked under the cushions, looked for bugs, spilled food, anything. Found nothing. Still, he wouldn't go near it. He'd walk into the room and freeze if the couch was in his path. Then, he'd circle around it like it was a hole in the ground. One night, I saw him hissing at it from the hallway. No reason, just sitting there puffed up, growling low. That was the first time I felt uncomfortable in the apartment. But I pushed it down. It was just a cat being weird. That's what I told myself. That weekend I was messing around with Snapchat filters, just bored, filming Baxter with those dumb puppy ears and face distortion effects. He hated it. Typical. Then I pointed the camera around the room, just looking at how the filters mapped random objects. It was when I panned past the couch that I froze. The face filter locked onto the top right cushion, right where someone's head would be if someone was sitting there. I thought it was a glitch, so I pulled back. The filter disappeared. Moved the phone closer again. Face appeared, smiling, not cartoonish like the rest. It was subtle, human-like, not exaggerated. Eyes locked forward, unmoving. I stood up and moved around the room. Tried the filter from different angles. Same result. Always on the top part of the couch, as if it was mapping to something invisible. I even switched filters. Every single face filter latched onto the same spot. I backed away slowly. The filter stayed fixed. The longer I looked at it, the more I realized the face wasn't just appearing. It was following. I moved right. The face shifted left. I moved left. It tracked me, like it was watching. I dragged the couch away from the wall, gripping the phone with both hands. Moved it slow, backward without taking my eyes off the screen. The face didn't glitch. It didn't vanish. It moved with the couch. No matter where I placed it, the filter kept mapping something on the same headrest cushion. That thing was still there. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the app. Maybe some weird lighting. But deep down, I knew better. I turned the couch around, just in case. That's when the face rotated too, locking onto me, watching me straight on. No reaction, just presence. My fingers were trembling, but I pushed the couch into the hallway anyway. Its weight scraped the wood and echoed through the apartment. I didn't care about the noise. I wanted it out. I shoved it toward the door, turned it sideways, dragged it down the stairs step by step. The whole time I kept checking the phone. The filter stayed fixed, dead center. I left it on the curb, angled away from the building. Thought that would be enough. Thought I'd done something smart. When I got back upstairs, I locked the door and shut every blind. But the silence didn't feel like safety. I couldn't stop myself. I walked over to the window and peeked out through the side of the curtain. The streetlight buzzed above the couch. I raised my phone. Snapchat still open. The face was there. Even from that distance. Still centered on the same spot. Still facing my direction. It hadn't disappeared. It hadn't even shifted. Just waited. That night, I fell asleep without remembering how. 1 second, I was lying there, scrolling mindlessly. The next, I was frozen. Awake, but not awake. I couldn't move anything. My eyes were open, stuck on the ceiling, breathing shallow. It was like my whole body had disconnected, but not the fear. The fear worked fine. My heart slammed against my chest like it wanted out. Something was wrong. Not vague, not abstract. Something real was in the room. Only my right hand twitched. Barely. My phone was still next to me. My thumb dragged it closer. The screen lit up my face in a faint glow. Snapchat was already open. And the couch was back, at the foot of the bed, right in front of me. I tried to rationalize again, but nothing made sense anymore. I had thrown it away. I saw it on the street. I left it there. But now it was here. Same cushion, same burn mark near the armrest, same exact shape. I aimed the phone at it, just to see. Maybe to prove I wasn't losing it. The filter caught something instantly. The face appeared, but it wasn't static this time. It was rising. slowly, like something getting up. First, just the eyes above the cushion, then the mouth, then the rest of the head. It wasn't just standing there. It was reacting. It knew I was watching. And then the filter glitched downward, recentered. Now it was tracking something closer, something on the bed. I didn't want to believe it, but I had no choice. The shape had moved from the couch onto the mattress. The pressure at my feet hit a second later. Not immediate like in a dream. This was slow and cruel. First, just a shift in the blanket, then weight, enough to sink the mattress slightly. I kept the phone aimed at the spot. The filter followed. It mapped the thing crawling toward me, like it was analyzing each movement. It was hunched low, trying to stay out of sight, but the filter picked it up with perfect clarity. A distorted face, teeth clenched, eyes blank. It didn't blink. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't listen. My chest burned like my lungs were locked. The thing crawled with its knees and elbows, dragging itself closer with uneven rhythm. I could feel the shift in pressure each time it moved. The bed creaked softly, but there was no sound beyond that. No breathing, no footsteps. Just slow progress and that growing, suffocating heat that rolled up my legs with every inch. The filter warped again as it approached my waist. Its face moved like it was stretching, like it was trying to tear the digital skin off. My thumb shook violently. The phone was slipping. I couldn't look away. The thing was almost on top of me. Then I felt it. A breath, hot and rancid, directly on my stomach. I was seconds from blacking out, not from fear, but from the sheer pressure building inside my own body. I didn't see Baxter leap, just felt the bed shake. His claws dug into my ribs as he landed on me, hissing, ears pinned back. That snapped something loose in my head. I gasped. The gasp turned into a scream. My limbs jerked free all at once. I shoved myself upright, clawing at the blanket, dragging Baxter with me. He wasn't trying to run. He was trying to protect. The couch was still there at the end of the bed, but the presence, whatever it was, had vanished. I didn't waste time looking for signs. I bolted for the bedroom and nearly tripped over my own feet in the hallway. That's when the heat slapped me against the face for real. Not phantom warmth, but dry, dangerous heat. I turned the corner and saw the kitchen glowing. Orange flickers bouncing off the walls. The stove was on, all 4 burners. The curtains were already halfway gone, curling into black smoke. Flames climbed the wall like they had a path to follow. I could barely see. I scooped up at Baxter with both arms and ran. Didn't even grab my shoes. The hallway was already full of smoke. My eyes burned. I stumbled down the stairs coughing, almost fell twice, and burst out the front door choking. People had gathered on the sidewalk, backing away from the flames. I turned around just once, just to see. The couch wasn't there anymore. Not in the room, not in the fire, not on the curb, just gone. I stayed at a friend's place after that. Didn't talk much. I told her about the fire, not about the filter, not about the couch, not about what crawled up the bed and stared into my ribs. I didn't want to hear myself say it out loud. I've been sleeping with all the lights on, windows shut, phone deleted. Not just the app, everything. I use a flip phone now. Baxter hasn't left my side. He sleeps on my chest, alert, watching the room. Sometimes he growls at nothing, but I don't ask why. I don't want to know. A few nights ago, I woke up to that weight again. Lower this time, at my knees. It didn't last long. Just long enough for the mattress to bend under something that wasn't there. I didn't open my eyes, just kept still, breathing shallow, pretending I wasn't awake. And then I heard it. Plastic crackling, like burning fabric being crushed slowly. Just for a second. When I finally looked, there was nothing. No couch, no face, but the floor still smelled like smoke.
I started this job 3 months ago. Night driving.
Simple stuff. I pick up clients, drive them to wherever they say, and don't ask questions. That's the rule. No questions, no problems. That's what the guy who hired me told me. The pay was good enough to make me ignore how vague it all sounded. I didn't sign anything. They just told me where to go and when. Always at night. Always in black cars that weren't mine. The passengers were strange. Always men in suits. Never women, never kids. No one ever spoke. They just got in, gave me an address, and stared out the window or at their phones like I didn't exist. I tried small talk a couple of times, but they'd look at me like I'd broken some sacred rule, so I stopped. I learned to drive in silence. Still, every night felt off. The way they acted, it wasn't normal. Their faces were too blank, their voices too calm when they gave the addresses. And sometimes when the car stopped at red lights, I'd feel eyes on me. I'd look up through the mirror and one of them would be staring directly at me. No emotion at all, just staring. It made my stomach twist every time. But I needed the money. Rent was late, bills were piling up, and this was the only job that didn't care about my record. So I kept driving, pretending not to notice how wrong everything felt. They called me just after midnight for a pickup outside an office building downtown. When I got there, 2 men in suits were standing on the curb. Between them was a man sitting in a wheelchair, his head tilted slightly to one side, dark glasses covering his eyes even though it was pitch black outside. One of the men waved me over like I was a cab. They opened the back door and lifted the man out of the chair. His body hung limp between them like he was drunk or asleep. They sat him in the back seat, adjusted his coat, and shut the door without saying a word to me. Then one of them leaned in and said, low and sharp, "Drive to 77 Willow Street." No stops. There was something off about the way he said it. His tone wasn't a request. It was a warning. I nodded and started the engine. The 2 men stayed on the sidewalk, watching until the car turned the corner. I kept my eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. The first thing I noticed about the man in the back was his smell. It hit me halfway down the block. Cheap perfume. The kind that burns your nose. Strong enough to make me roll the window down a crack. I glanced in the mirror. He was sitting straight, facing forward, his hands on his knees, still, not breathing heavily, not moving at all, just sitting there. The route was long, 30 minutes through quiet streets with barely any traffic. Every minute stretched. The man in the back didn't move once. I tried to convince myself he was asleep, but there was no rhythm to his breathing, no sound at all, just that perfume, like the inside of a cheap funeral home. At one point, I cleared my throat and said something. "Sorry about the traffic. It's usually lighter this time of night." Nothing, not a word. I looked again in the mirror, hoping for even the smallest reaction. His head hadn't moved, but under the dark glasses, could have sworn he was looking straight into the reflection. Felt it. Like the second I looked away, he'd blink or smile or something worse. The longer I drove, the more I started to shake. My fingers slipped on the steering wheel from sweat. I thought about pulling over, just for a second, to breathe. But the words, "no stops," echoed in my head. The company didn't play around. I heard stories about drivers who broke the rules. None of them worked there anymore. Then came the sound, a low, broken mumble from the back seat. I froze. It wasn't a word, more like a moan, soft and wet, like someone trying to speak underwater. I looked in the mirror again, and for the first time he moved. His jaw shifted slightly, trembling. I slowed down just enough to glance over my shoulder. He was shaking. His hands twitched on his knees, fingers jerking like he was fighting to move. His lips parted, drool sliding down his chin. I gripped the wheel tighter and forced myself to keep driving. My heartbeat drowned out the sound of the tires. I couldn't take it anymore. The sounds were getting louder, whispers maybe, words I couldn't make out. I leaned forward, pretending to adjust the radio, but my eyes went to the mirror again. His head turned, just a little, enough for me to see his mouth move. It wasn't random mumbling now. It was like he was trying to form sentences, but his tongue wasn't working right. His teeth clicked together. His head twitched forward, Slow at first, then faster, until his chin almost hit his chest. He was convulsing, softly, like something was crawling under his skin. My stomach flipped. I wanted to stop the car. I wanted to open the door and run. But that voice from my boss, no stops, stuck in my head like a nail. My job was to drive. That's it. Then he made a sound I'll never forget. A laugh, or maybe it was a cough. Sharp, dry, and too human to ignore. I pressed harder on the gas. The faster I went, the louder he got. His breath came in short bursts. Then, suddenly, silence again. I didn't want to look, but I did. His head was up now, perfectly straight. His glasses reflected the dashboard lights, but behind the reflection, I could see movement. His eyes. They weren't looking forward anymore. They were aimed directly at me. I started crying without realizing it. Quietly, trying not to make a sound, I couldn't tell what was worse, the silence or the breathing behind me. Every second felt like it stretched longer than the last. When I finally saw the street sign for Willow, I almost screamed in relief. The address was at the end of a cul-de-sac. No lights, no houses, just a big metal gate and 2 black cars parked outside. The same kind of men were waiting there. Dark suits, blank faces. I stopped the car, put it in park, and tried to steady my breathing. They walked over slowly. One of them tapped the window. I rolled it down, shaking so hard I could barely move. I told them something was wrong with the man in the back. I didn't want to turn around to show them, but I had to. I looked and saw the man jerking slightly, mumbling again. His glasses had slipped down, showing pale eyes rolled halfway back. One of the men opened the back door, glanced at him, and his face twisted in anger. The other guy stepped forward, grabbed the man by the throat, and started squeezing. There was no hesitation, no shouting, just the sound of cracking bones. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The driver's seat felt like a coffin. The man in the suit dropped the body to the ground like trash. Then he pulled out his phone and started yelling at someone.
He was alive. You told me he was processed.
He slammed the phone shut, breathing hard. He turned to me, eyes full of rage. Before I could react, he reached in, grabbed the back of my head, and slammed it against the steering wheel. My ears rang, everything spinning. He leaned in close, whispering through his teeth.
You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. Drive when we call. That's all you do.
I nodded, barely able to see through the blood in my eyes. I don't remember driving home. The next thing I knew, I was in bed, still wearing my work clothes. My phone buzzed at noon. A message from the company. Pick up at 1 a.m. Don't be late. No explanation, no apology, just that. That night I showed up like always. Same car, same smell of cheap air freshener. My head still hurt, and the dried blood on my hairline itched under my hat. The streets were empty, again. Every shadow looked like those men waiting for me. The passengers didn't talk, didn't look at me, didn't act like anything had happened. But I couldn't stop seeing that man's neck snapping in front of me. Every time I blinked, I saw it again. The way his body twitched once before going limp, and the way the other man didn't even flinch. Now, every time I drive, I feel like someone's in the back seat, even when it's empty. Sometimes I check the mirror and swear I see him sitting there, head tilted, glasses on. That same damn perfume filling the car. It's been 2 months since that day. I still drive for them. I can't quit. Every night they text me new addresses, new passengers, new names. No explanations. I just drive.
Hi, my name is Jessica, and something terrible happened to me last night. I don't really have immediate family or close friends, and I really want to get it off my chest, so I will just tell it to you guys. I work at a call center, and if one thing those places are famous for, it's the odd working hours. Lately I've been a little tight on money, so I decided to pick up the night shift that pays more. The worst part of the night shift wasn't the work itself, but the hassle of finding commute back home. I don't own a car, so my best option is to wait for a late night bus or call an Uber. Most nights I call an Uber, as the bus service is unreliable. But I don't think I'll ever get in an Uber after last night. Hell, I'm not even working nights anymore. As usual, I got off work at 2:30 a.m. and booked an Uber as I got down from my office. Luckily, there was a cab in the vicinity and the app booked it for me. I was dead tired, hungry, and sleepy at the same time, so as soon as the white cab parked on the street across from me, I got in the back seat and relaxed while the driver started driving. Now, you must know that I live a little far away from my office, so it usually takes half an hour to reach home. We cross 3 signals in the way and take 2 bridges. Just as the cab neared the first signal, I was ready to doze off. When the red light was on, the cab stopped and I was casually scrolling through my phone. That's when someone opened the driver's side door and a young man in his 20s peeked in. "Can I get a ride till the next intersection, please?" He asked the driver politely, and the driver, who must be in his 50s, replied, "Get in." He never once asked me if I was comfortable letting a stranger ride in my cab that I was paying for, but I was so drained that I didn't object. Not intervening then was my biggest mistake. I was a little alert after that, but not as much as I should have been. The next signal was up ahead of us and the intersection just beyond it. That's when a text from an unknown number popped in my phone. "Get out of the cab immediately. Not safe. Stolen car. Fake driver. Get out now." I must have read that text at least 5 times. Before I knew that I was in a problematic situation, the young guy casually chatted with the driver as they both kept on looking back at me through the rearview mirror. The car was moving, and there was no way I could get off at that point. Neither could I confront the 2 men. I couldn't even call the cops as the men would get suspicious, so I dug into my bag and held onto the pepper spray, praying to God that the text I received was a prank. However, the next intersection came and went by, but the cab didn't stop. "Keep going, I'm just up ahead," the man told my driver, who nodded and kept driving. However, we were nearing the 3rd signal and the young man was still in the cab getting comfortable. I had planned to escape the car as it would stop at the intersection, but instead the driver took a rough left turn onto a deserted road. "Hey, that's not the way! Where are we going?" I yelled as I went into a full-on panic mode. "It's a shortcut, lady," the driver grunted, but I knew this place like the back of my hand, and this was no shortcut. This was a trap. The car sped up and I dialed the cops. The operator kept on asking what my emergency was, but I could not utter a word, too scared to spook my kidnappers. The car stopped at a warehouse, and as I was about to bolt, the driver locked the car, and both the men looked at me. "Now, young lady, you can either give us what we want willingly, or we can take it by force," the young man said, and I immediately fished for cash in my purse. "I'll give you all my money, just let me go. Please, please, I beg you." Ugly sobs raked my face, terror gripping my body. "If money was what we wanted, we could have just snatched your purse, no?" The old man snickered and gave me a hungry look. That's when I knew they wanted to violate me sexually, and I clutched the spray in my hand. There was no one for miles on end, and no one would hear my cry for help here. The young man got out of the car and pulled my door open, grabbing me by my hair, ready to pull me out. But just then, I sprayed him. "Fuck, you bitch! Hell, it burns!" He let go of me and began wiping his eyes. The older man reached for me, but instead the whole dark warehouse got lit. Floodlights were everywhere, and footsteps and shouting began. "Police, get down on your knees, show us your hands, and let go of the woman." Cops surrounded the place and I went limp inside the car. The next few minutes went by in a blur, but there were doctors and cops who wanted to talk to me. But I was so confused. The cops later told me that the cab was really stolen and the real owner, Mr. Amir, a Sri Lankan man, had reported it. However, the thief had logged into Mr. Amir's Uber account and was driving around people pretending to be Mr. Amir. The cops couldn't figure out the thief's motive, but they knew something was up. The GPS tracker in the cab allowed the cops to keep tabs on it, so they kept tracking the vehicle. But when I got into the car at night, the cops had had enough. The cops had hacked into Mr. Amir's Uber account to get my contact information, and that text I had received was from the cops warning me. However, when the cops investigated the two men, they found out that one of them was a repeat sex offender, responsible for at least sexually violating 6 women in various states around the country. He was out on parole. The other was his nephew, who had multiple charges, a misdemeanor, and theft on him. He was even involved in carjacking a government vehicle. Both these individuals were extremely dangerous, and I was their latest victim. If only the cops hadn't arrived when they did. I am not sure if I would still be here telling you this story or not.
I still remember everything. Hell, how can I forget that night? I remember being excited for being in front of that house. It looked like something straight out of a movie. Tall windows, creaking wood, and a slight tilt to its frame that made it seem like it was leaning in to hear secrets. I had booked a few nights at the infamous Stanley's Airbnb, the haunted spot everyone online couldn't shut up about. People claimed they'd seen him. A ghost who likes to mess around but never hurt anyone. They said he was playful, even friendly. That's exactly what I wanted. A harmless thrill. Something to tell my friends about. When I got there, the host had left a handwritten note on the counter. Enjoy your stay. Stanley's harmless. Unless you provoke him. I laughed at that. Cute. They really leaned into the gimmick. The house was cold inside, colder than it should have been for late summer. I figured it was just old insulation. No big deal. I spent the first night wandering around, looking for anything out of the ordinary. All I got were a few creaky floorboards and a light that flickered in the upstairs hallway. Not exactly the spine-tingling experience I'd hoped for. The second night, I decided to step it up. If Stanley wasn't going to show himself, I'd make him. I'd seen enough ghost hunting videos to know the tricks. Call him out, challenge him, maybe even taunt him a little. It felt silly at first, standing in the middle of the living room, shouting at an empty house. Come on, Stanley. Show me what you got. What, are you scared? Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I laughed at myself, but part of me was disappointed. I tried again, louder this time. You're supposed to be this big bad ghost! Still nothing. No wonder why you're just a local attraction. Imagine being a ghost and still being this pathetic. That's just lame, Stanley. No wonder why you don't show up. By the time I gave up, it was nearly midnight. I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed. That's when I heard it. A faint scratching noise. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. At first, I thought it was mice. Then it got louder, more deliberate. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Like something sharp was being dragged against the wood. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. The sound stopped. The next morning, I found scratches on the outside of the bedroom door. Deep, jagged marks that hadn't been there before. They looked fresh, like someone had taken a knife to the wood. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Maybe the host trying to add to the experience. But when I called them, They swore they hadn't been there since the last guest. The day passed without incident, but the house felt off. The air felt heavy, like the kind of pressure you feel before a storm. That night, I tried to keep things light. I watched a movie on my laptop, drank a couple of beers, and avoided calling out to Stanley. But the house wasn't going to let me off that easy. Around 1 a.m., the TV in the living room turned on by itself. I went downstairs expecting to find the remote had fallen and hit a button, but it was still on the coffee table. I turned the TV off and started back up the stairs when the scratching came back. Louder this time. It wasn't in the walls anymore. It was coming from the front door. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down at the door. The scratching was relentless, frantic, like whatever was on the other side was desperate to get in. I grabbed a fireplace poker from the living room and crept toward the door. The moment my hand touched the knob, the scratching stopped. I flung the door open, but no one was there. The porch was empty, the street silent. Just as I started to close the door, I felt a rush of cold air blow past me into the house. My stomach sank. I locked the door and backed away, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. Then the lights went out. Every bulb in the house all at once. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, and the beam shook in my hands. I could hear footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. They moved from room to room, pausing just long enough to make it clear they weren't mine. I ran up the stairs, shouting at whatever was up there. "Who's there? What do you want?" The footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the door to the bedroom slammed shut. I froze. My brain screamed at me to leave, but my body wouldn't move. Finally, I forced myself forward, shoving the door open. The room was empty, but the bed was unmade. The sheets twisted like someone had been thrashing around in them. On the wall above the bed, scratched deep into the plaster, was a single word. Leave. I couldn't leave. I had nowhere to go until daylight. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room waiting for morning. Around 4 a.m. the air changed. It felt electric, like the house was holding its breath. Then the banging started. It came from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, the floor. It was deafening, like the whole house was trying to shake itself apart. I ran to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock wouldn't turn, and when I tried to kick it open, it felt like I was hitting solid concrete. The windows were the same, unbreakable no matter what I threw at them. The banging grew louder, more violent, and then it stopped. Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. That's when I felt it. A presence, standing right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Cold figures brushed against the back of my neck, and I bolted, running upstairs and slamming the door to the master bedroom behind me. I could hear footsteps following, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside the door. I didn't want to see what would happen next. I grabbed a chair and smashed it against the bedroom window until the glass finally shattered. It wasn't a big enough hole to climb through, but it was a start. I grabbed the nightstand, the lamp, anything I could find, and kept swinging until the window was wide open. As I climbed through, I felt something grab my ankle, pulling me back. I kicked and twisted, finally breaking free and tumbling onto the roof. I didn't stop. I slid down the shingles and jumped to the ground, hitting the dirt hard enough to knock the wind out of me. The front door burst open, slamming against the wall. That's when I saw him. Stanley. He didn't look like a ghost. He was a man, or at least he used to be. His face was pale, twisted into a grotesque grin. His eyes were black, endless pits, and his hands were covered in blood. He just raised his hand and pointed to the door, telling me to leave. I couldn't move. I had too much fear. I was paralyzed. He considered that I was still provoking him, so when I didn't move, he moved for me. Suddenly, he started to move his legs quickly in my direction. After a few thousandths of a second, he was already running at high speed. This made me react, and I also ran as fast as I could. I don't know at what point he stopped, but when I turned around, he was no longer chasing me. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road. A truck driver picked me up, said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Well, I had. When I tried to explain what had happened, he just shook his head and told me to get some rest. The police didn't find anything when they checked the house. No scratches, no broken windows, no sign of Stanley. They said I must have imagined it, that maybe I'd had too much to drink. But I know what I saw, and I know I'll never go back to that Airbnb. Stanley's still there, waiting for his next guest. Maybe he really is a friendly ghost. But that doesn't mean you can disrespect him. And I learned that the hard way. I never thought a late-night craving would turn into the most terrifying experience of my life. I'm usually cautious when heading out after dark, but that night, my hunger got the better of me. Little did I know, my decision to grab food would lead to a close encounter with something or someone, straight out of a nightmare. It was around 2 a.m. when I decided to go to the nearby 24-hour Burger King. The streets were quiet, and I told myself I'd be in and out in no time. I parked my car in the half-empty lot and walked inside. The familiar smell of fries and burgers greeted me as I approached the counter. After a brief exchange with an employee I recognized, I placed my order. Everything seemed normal, just another routine pit stop for fast food. I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. I picked up my meal and was heading back to my car when I noticed something unusual. A black SUV was parked directly in front of me, its engine running, but the headlights were off. What caught my attention even more was the silhouette inside. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, completely still, their head tilted slightly toward me. I couldn't make out any of their features in the dim light, but the way they stared sent shivers down my spine. I told myself I was overreacting and climbed into my car. As I shut the door, I glanced at the SUV again. This time, I could see his eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and fixed directly on me. My stomach twisted. Before I could even start my engine, a loud thud startled me. It came from inside the SUV. The figure's gaze disappeared as they turned to face something in the back seat. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cracked my window to get a better look. The noises stopped abruptly. Then, the back door of the SUV flew open. Out stepped a man. No, more like a beast of a man, towering, muscular, and seething with rage. He staggered out as if disoriented, looked around wildly, and then let out a scream that could wake the dead. The sound was guttural and full of fury, the kind of scream you feel in your chest. I froze. Gripping my phone, I started recording a voice message for the friend who worked inside. I told him about the man and asked him to call security. As I hit send, I glanced up to see the man climb onto the roof of the SUV. He stood there, chest heaving, his head snapping in every direction like an animal searching for prey. Then his eyes locked onto mine. My heart stopped. He roared and jumped down, landing with a thud that echoed through the lot. Without hesitation, he charged at my car. I turned the key in the ignition, but my car sputtered and refused to start. Panic surged through me as he closed the distance. I twisted the key again, praying it would work this time. Finally, the engine roared to life. I slammed on the gas just as he reached my car. There was a loud bang on the roof as I sped away. I didn't stop driving until I was home. My driveway felt like a sanctuary as I pulled in and turned off the engine. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I grabbed my phone to check the message I'd sent earlier. My friend had replied, and his voice was frantic. "Get out now! A guard saw you leaving. The guy, he isn't in the lot anymore. He's on top of your—" Before he could finish, a hand shot through my open window and grabbed me by my neck. The phone fell from my hand as I was yanked halfway out of the car. The man's grip was like iron, and his eyes burned with an unhinged intensity. He pulled me out completely and threw me to the ground with terrifying strength. I scrambled backward on the pavement, my palms scraping against the rough surface. He stalked toward me, his movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. My mind raced for a way out, but I was paralyzed with fear. He raised his fist, and I braced for the worst. Out of nowhere, headlights flooded the scene. A car screeched to a halt, and 3 young men jumped out. They ran toward us, shouting at the man to back off. For a moment, I thought they'd scare him away, but he didn't even flinch. Instead, he grabbed one of them by the arm, twisted it with inhuman strength, and tossed him aside like a rag doll. The other 2 tried to tackle him, but he threw them off with ease. The distraction gave me a chance to crawl toward my car, but my legs felt like jelly. The man turned back to me, his face contorted with rage. He was shaking, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Just as he lunged, I remembered the taser in my bag. My hands fumbled as I pulled it out, but adrenaline gave me the speed I needed. As he closed the gap, I pressed the taser to his side and fired. He convulsed and collapsed to the ground. I didn't stick around to see if he'd stay down. I grabbed my key, stumbled into my house, and locked the door behind me. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely dial 911. Through the window, I could see the 3 men getting back into their car. One of them was on his phone, probably calling for help too. The man outside, though, he wasn't finished. He got up, slamming his fist against my door, shouting incoherently. The sound was deafening, each blow threatening to break the door down. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, flashing blue and red lights appeared at the end of my street. The police arrived and subdued him after a struggle. Later, I learned that the SUV wasn't registered to him or anyone nearby. The police couldn't identify him, and he was eventually sent to a psychiatric facility. As for me, I've learned my lesson. I still get late-night cravings, but I'll never let my guard down again. And if I ever see someone acting strange, I won't stick around to find out why.
I had been driving for hours. The road was dead straight, empty, and black. My hands were tight on the wheel. The GPS said 2 more hours to go, and my stomach felt like it was eating itself. No gas stations, no houses, nothing. Then a red glow appeared ahead. At first I thought it was just another random billboard, but as I got closer I saw the smiling red-haired face on the sign. A Wendy's. I slowed down. It didn't make sense. A Wendy's in the middle of nowhere. But I didn't care. I was starving. I pulled into the parking lot. Only one pickup parked near the entrance. The lights inside flickered weakly like they were about to die. The sign outside buzzed with a low electric hum. When I stepped out of the car, the night felt too quiet. No wind, no cars, just the buzzing sign. I walked toward the door and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't rotten, but it was stale, like old grease and wet mop water that never really dried. The floor had stains that didn't look recent, and a few tables were out of place. There was only one guy behind the counter, bald. His head had thick veins bulging against the skin, and they pulsed as he breathed. His uniform looked dusty, like it had been hanging in a closet for years. He just stared at me without moving. I stepped up to the counter. He turned slowly, walked to the kitchen, and grabbed a raw patty. His hands trembled when he dropped it on the grill. The flames jumped and he flinched hard, pulling his arms back like they'd burned him. I watched him from the counter. He kept glancing at the fire like it was alive. His breathing got louder and faster. His whole body twitched like he was forcing himself to keep going. He wrapped the burger fast, like he couldn't stand touching it. When he came back, his hands were shaking worse. His veins looked darker, swollen. He didn't move right, like something inside him was twisting around. He stopped in front of the counter, staring at nothing. His chest rose and fell too fast. Then he slammed his hands down on the counter and came around it. His movements weren't smooth. They were jerky, like his body wasn't fully under control. He grabbed me by the shirt and shoved me against the wall. His grip was strong and cold. His face was inches from mine. His breath smelled like grease and something burned deep underneath it. His eyes didn't focus on me. They stared at something behind me, something I couldn't see. His jaw locked. His body shook. His breath came out in short bursts. I could feel the heat of his skin against mine, but his hands were ice cold. He kept holding me for a few seconds, breathing hard. Then his arms went limp and he backed away like he'd forgotten what he was doing. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "You need to leave, right now. It's starting again. This place will be on fire soon." I moved toward the exit. I needed to get out of there. That man was completely insane. Right before I stepped outside, his hand landed on my shoulder. His grip was stiff, like he was forcing it. I turned. His face was pale, stretched, his lips trembling. He held out the wrapped burger toward me. His eyes were locked on mine. I didn't want it, but I took it. He didn't move after that. I walked fast to my car, threw the burger in the passenger seat, and started the engine. My hands were shaking. I didn't even look back. The first scream came as I shifted into drive. It was loud and sharp, tearing through the night. It froze me for a second. Then another scream, louder. I turned my head. He was standing at the entrance of the Wendy's. His body was shaking violently. His hands were on his face. His voice was raw, broken. "It's burning again! It's burning! It won't stop! It's eating me alive! The heat is inside my skin! It's peeling off! It's melting!" He dropped to his knees, screaming louder. "It's on my face! It's on my face! I can feel it sliding off! I can't breathe! It's in my mouth! It's burning my tongue! My eyes, they're gone! I can't see! I can't see!" He clawed at his own face, screaming like something was tearing him apart from the inside. The building behind him stayed dark and still. No fire, no smoke, just him. I hit the gas and drove away. 3 kilometers down, another Wendy's appeared. Bright lights, clean windows, a parking lot full of cars. It looked new, normal. I stepped inside. It smelled like fresh fries and disinfectant. There were several employees behind the counter. None of them looked like him. I told them what I saw, the empty building, the bald guy, the screams. They stared at me like I was talking about something that shouldn't exist. One of them said the old Wendy's burned down years ago. One worker didn't make it out. He screamed until the roof collapsed. Everyone who worked there that night remembered his voice. I didn't say anything else. I left. I drove back down the hallway. No sign, no flickering lights, no building, just the burned foundation of a place that had died a long time ago. Black concrete, melted steel, weeds creeping out of the cracks. I got out of the car. No humming, no sound at all. The air was still. The smell of ash clung to the ground, faint, but real. I got back in the car. That's when I saw it. On the passenger seat, the burger. The bun was cracked and dry. The meat inside was black, slimy, and reeked like rotting flesh. I opened the window and threw it out. It hit the ground with a heavy, wet slap. I slammed the gas pedal and didn't look back. I never drove down that highway again.
My name is Craig, and I never thought selling knives online could put my life and my family in danger. I was just a small seller on Amazon, moving boxes of kitchen knives from a supplier to customers who wanted something affordable. It was routine, boring, and safe, or at least I believed it was. Most buyers left no feedback at all, and the few that did usually mentioned shipping times or packaging quality. I thought the worst problem I would ever face was a lost package or a return request. Things changed when I received a review unlike any I had seen before. It wasn't about customer service or the sharpness of the blade for cooking. The buyer complained that the knife bent when he tested it on thicker material. The wording was cold, calculated, and far too specific. His username was cut deep enough, and something about it froze me. He didn't ask for a replacement, didn't even want a refund. He just stated that the knife failed and he would be in touch. At first, I tried to dismiss it as some twisted joke, but then I started noticing little changes around my home. Packages delivered to my porch were cut open and resealed, not stolen, just violated. The seams of the cardboard were cleanly sliced, not torn by hand. My wife Claire thought it was porch pirates trying to scare us off, but nothing was missing. It wasn't theft, it was a warning. The silence of those nights made me restless. I heard gravel crunch outside my window, heavy steps that stopped and stayed for too long. When I opened the blinds, there was never anyone there. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. Deep down, I knew I wasn't. The real message arrived in a package that wasn't from Amazon. There was no return label, no tape from a warehouse, just a plain box left directly on my porch. Inside was one of the very knives I had shipped weeks earlier, but this was no longer clean. The blade was bent and the metal stained with something dark that had dried into thick streaks. The wooden handle was cracked, like it had been smashed against something unyielding. Alongside it was a note written in rushed, blocky handwriting. It read, "Not deep enough. Refund not accepted. Talking soon." I kept that knife hidden in the garage, unable to throw it away, but terrified of leaving it in the house. Claire asked about the box, but I lied, saying it was a return. I could feel something spiraling out of control, and admitting it out loud would make it real. The next few nights were worse. Our dog barked at the same corner of the yard until it lost its voice, and every time I stepped outside, I felt watched. I began locking every door twice, keeping lights on in every room, but none of it mattered. The fear wasn't outside anymore. It had followed me into every corner of the house. When I checked my Amazon seller account, I found a new message. Short, blunt, and terrifying in its simplicity. Face to face, soon. It happened on a Wednesday night. Claire was upstairs folding laundry while I finished some shipping labels in the kitchen. A knock rattled the front door, so forceful it shook the frame. It wasn't the polite tap of a visitor. It was the pounding of someone who already owned the space they were demanding to enter. Before I could react, a voice seeped through the wood. Calm, steady, and chillingly deliberate. "I want a refund." I froze in place. My legs wanted to move, but fear weighed them down. Claire shouted from upstairs asking who it was, but I couldn't answer. I inched toward the door and glanced through the side window. That's when I saw him. He was standing perfectly still, holding one of my knives. His face was stretched into a grin too wide to be genuine. His eyes opened too far, unblinking, scanning the house like he had been living in it already. He tapped the blade against his thigh with a rhythm, like a metronome counting down. I shut the blinds in panic, but the pounding grew louder. Then, silence. For one brief second I thought maybe he left. The sound of shattering glass ripped that thought away as the kitchen window exploded inward. He climbed through with terrifying speed, landing on the floor like he had rehearsed it. Claire screamed from the stairs, but he reached her before I could. His hand shot around her throat, pulling her down the steps with brutal control. The dull blade pressed against her face, dragging just enough to leave a faint line without drawing blood. He smiled, his teeth clenched tight as if the grin was locked in place. "This is what you sell? This toy? I used it, and it failed. It bent. Do you know what happens when tools fail? People lose faith. People die sloppy. You ruined efficiency." His voice rose and fell without logic, swinging between calm explanations and sudden shouts. Every word came out like a performance for an audience only he could see. Claire struggled, gasping for air, while I collapsed to my knees, begging him to stop. He dragged her closer to me, crouching so we were all at eye level. His expression twisted from amusement to rage in an instant. "Look at her. Look at your product. If this knife had been made correctly, she would already be silent. But no. It bends. It resists. Do you understand what you cost me?" He pressed the blade harder against her cheek, and her eyes filled with tears. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. All I could do was plead, promising money, begging for her life. He didn't flinch. The tension inside the room was unbearable, like every second was balanced on the edge of the blade against her skin. He tilted his head, staring at me with eyes that didn't blink, and then he began laughing. It wasn't joy or humor, it was the cackling of someone who found amusement in destruction. "You sell lies. You sit in this house with your little business and your neat packaging, but you have no idea what your tools are used for. I used them. I tested them. They failed. And now you fail." He shoved Claire into my arms, only to slam his boot into my ribs before I could catch her properly. Pain shot through me as I collapsed, coughing and choking on my breath. He crouched beside me, grabbed the envelope of cash I kept in the drawer, and spread it out like he was grading an assignment. Pathetic. You think money fixes failure? You think bills can sharpen a dull edge? No. Money is meaningless without reliability. Refund means acknowledgement. Refund means apology. You don't even understand your own business. His voice cracked into a scream as he waved the knife inches from my face. Claire sobbed behind me, and I couldn't shield her. My entire body shook as he pocketed half the cash, leaving the rest scattered on the floor. "I'll take the refund. I'll take travel expenses, but I'll also take your reputation. The world will know this knife is worthless." He spat on the floor and kicked me again, leaving me curled on the ground, gasping for air. His last words echoed like a death sentence. 1 star! And then he was gone, walking out the back door as if he owned it. Minutes passed before I could move. Claire clung to me, shaking violently, her face streaked with tears. My rib burned every time I breathed, but I forced myself to crawl to the phone and dial the police. When the officers arrived, their flashlights cut across the house, shining on broken glass and scattered bills, but there was no trace of him outside. I gave them everything I could remember, his height, his face, his words, but the way they looked at me made it clear they didn't understand. To them, it was a home invasion, maybe a burglary gone wrong. They didn't understand the performance, the obsession, the reason behind his visit. After they left, I returned to the kitchen. My laptop was open on the table. I hadn't left it that way. My Amazon seller account was on the screen, and a new review had been posted. It was 1 star. Product bends, doesn't cut deep enough, seller incompetent, avoid at all costs. It has been 2 weeks since he invaded my home. Claire barely sleeps, and when she does, she wakes up screaming. I haven't closed my eyes without seeing his grin, his eyes, the way he held the knife like it was more important than our lives. I've suspended my Amazon account, and we don't live in that house anymore. We don't even go near that place. And we never will. This story is based on the case of Todd Kohlhepp, a serial killer and sex offender known for using his Amazon account to leave sinister and disturbing reviews on products he purchased, many of which were related to his crimes. In 2016, police arrested him after discovering a woman chained in a metal container on his property in South Carolina. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Kohlhepp had murdered 7 people between 2003 and 2016. He appeared to be a successful man. He worked as a real estate agent and had a degree in business. However, he had a criminal record dating back to his youth for sexual assault. He was sentenced to 7 life sentences without the possibility of parole.
My name is Claire. I was 12 when it happened. My brother Ethan was just 10 months old. That night was supposed to be normal. Mom and Dad had a party downtown. They didn't want to leave us alone, so they hired Madison. Madison was everything parents liked. Smiling, polite, always saying the right thing. My parents trusted her. After 5 minutes, they said goodnight, kissed Ethan, waved at me goodbye, and left. The door clicked shut. I sat on the couch half watching a cartoon. Madison cleaned the kitchen, humming softly. Every once in a while, she would glance at me with a look that didn't match her smile. It was too long, too sharp. The first hour was fine. Madison made popcorn, let me stay up past my bedtime, even gave me soda. It was weird, but I wasn't going to complain. Around 9, Ethan started crying. Madison picked him up and rocked him while whispering things I couldn't hear. She stared at him like she was studying him, not comforting him. I tried to brush it off, but something about the way she held him, too tight, too stiff, made my stomach twist. She carried him upstairs without saying a word. The house got quiet, too quiet. I muted the TV and listened. No talking, no singing, just a faint creak of footsteps upstairs, back and forth, like she was pacing. I stayed downstairs for a while, trying to pretend everything was fine, but the creaking didn't stop. I decided to check on Ethan. Walking upstairs felt wrong, like every step was pushing me closer to something I shouldn't see. I moved slow, keeping my hand tight on the railing. At the top, I heard it, slurping, wet, greedy sounds coming from the hallway. My skin prickled. I crept forward, past the bathroom, past my room, until I reached the nursery door. It was open just a crack. I looked inside. Madison was feeding Ethan. She was crouched by the mini fridge we kept upstairs for his milk. One of the bottles was in her hand. She ripped the top off and started chugging it. It spilled down her chin, her neck, soaking her blouse. She didn't care. Her eyes were rolled back, her hand squeezing the bottle so hard it bent. I froze. I didn't know what I was seeing. I took a step back, and the floorboard creaked under my foot. Madison's head snapped towards me, milk dripping from her chin. Her mouth was twisted into a smile that didn't look human. She stood up slowly, still holding the half-empty bottle. Her fingers left deep dents in the plastic. I wanted to run, but my legs didn't move fast enough. She grabbed me by the wrist and yanked me into the room. I stumbled over a toy truck and hit the floor hard. Ethan started wailing in his crib. Madison shoved the bottle at my face. "Drink it." I turned my head, but she forced the bottle against my mouth. Milk spilled all over me, dripping down my throat. It was warm and sour. I gagged and pushed her arm away. She dropped the bottle and grabbed my hair.
"You need to love it like I do. Come on, love it, or I'll kill you."
I scratched at her arm and kicked her in her shins, but she didn't flinch. Her strength didn't make sense. I managed to slip free for a second and bolted out the nursery, slipping onto the milk puddle. She was right behind me. Her feet thudded heavy on the carpet as she chased me down the hall. I didn't think. I ran for the stairs, half falling, grabbing into the railing to keep me from breaking my neck. Madison laughed behind me, short and sharp. I hit the living room and sprinted to the front door. Madison tackled me halfway across the room. We crashed onto the coffee table. Pain shot up to my ribs. She pinned me down, her face inches from mine. Her breath stank of old milk. She whispered things I didn't understand. Words that didn't even sound like English. I kneed her stomach and rolled away. She grabbed my ankle, her nails digging into my skin. But I kicked free and I scrambled to my feet. Without knowing, I ran outside, barefoot. Cold gravel cutting into my feet. But I didn't care. Madison followed, stumbling. Her blouse soaked and clinging onto her like a second skin. The neighbors were outside, walking their dog. They stopped when they saw us. Madison lunged at me again, but Mr. Grant, the neighbor, stepped between us. He grabbed Madison's arm. She trashed and screamed, foaming at the mouth. Mrs. Grant picked me up and pulled me to their porch. Mr. Grant wrestled Madison to the ground. She bit and scratched, trying to break free. Her screams didn't sound like a person anymore. They sounded like something else. The police arrived faster than I expected. Flashing lights filled the street. Madison didn't even fight when they cuffed her. She just smiled, milk dropping from her chin, eyes wide and empty. I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket. Ethan was safe, still crying but untouched. Mom and Dad arrived minutes later, faces white with panic. The police didn't explain much. They just said Madison was being taken somewhere secure. I heard words like obsessive behavior and psychotic break. I didn't care. I just wanted her gone. They told me later that Madison had been fired from her last job for stealing milk from a family's fridge. She had a record, but nothing serious enough to stop her from working again. Until now. We moved a month later. New house, new city. Mom and Dad still blame themselves. I don't. They couldn't have known. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they smile, say please and thank you, and act like the perfect babysitter. Until the night that they show you who they really are. I still can't drink milk without wanting to puke. And I don't trust anyone who smiles too much. I moved to Sacramento because I had nowhere else to go. After getting fired from my job in Reno, I took whatever I could find. Ended up sleeping in a little apartment behind a liquor store. Working nights loading crates at a warehouse near Arden Way. I didn't talk to anyone. Didn't want to. I just needed to make it through the month. Most nights after work, I'd walk a few blocks to clear my head. I'd stay in the quieter areas. Places where cops didn't patrol unless they had to. That's how I found Eleanor Avenue. Just a street like any other. Quiet, empty, but the houses were weird, like people had left without packing. I passed a place near the corner, number 3241. Its front door was wide open, swinging slightly like someone had kicked it in or forgotten. The porch light was on, but no one was around. I almost kept walking. Then I saw something inside, a shape on the floor, like someone had collapsed. I stopped and stared. No movement, no sound. I stepped to the door slowly. The shape wasn't moving. From where I stood, it looked like a woman. Her arms were at strange angles. Her clothes were stained. I didn't think about calling the cops. I walked inside, and from that moment on, everything went to hell. The woman was dead. Her skin had that dry look. It had been there sitting for too long. Her jaw hung open, eyes wide. I stared for too long. I know that now. But something upstairs snapped me out of it. A footstep, then another. At first, I thought someone else had found the body and was calling for help. But whoever was up there wasn't moving like that. He walked slow, steady, one step at a time, pacing like they were thinking. I didn't call out. I just listened, breathing through my teeth, frozen in place. The stairs creaked. Whatever was up there knew I was down here. There was a pause. Then I heard a voice, not loud, almost like they were talking to itself. Not again. My blood. So dirty. So dirty. The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded scared. But there was something off. Too calm. Too quiet. I stepped back towards the door, but it slammed shut on its own. Not all the way, just enough to hear the click. I turned and I saw him. He looked sick, pale, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in weeks. His clothes were stained, old. He held a knife like it wasn't a weapon, like it was just a part of him. And he smiled. Not a grin, just the kind of smile that people give to you when they don't understand what's happening. Hey man, you okay? Did the man that did this escape?
You're poisoned too. They're playing with you, manipulating you. But it doesn't work on me anymore.
I didn't speak. I didn't move. He tilted his head like a dog trying to read your thoughts. Then he started walking down the stairs, one slow step at a time. I backed away until I bumped into the dead woman's legs. He saw that and stopped mid-step.
I tried to help her. She bled wrong. It smelled like plastic.
That's when I realized he was the one who did this. So I bolted. I pushed past the body, ran towards the back of the house, but everything was blocked. Furniture stacked to the ceiling, closets nailed shut. The back door was chained. I could hear his bare feet slapping the stairs behind me. I ran to the kitchen, opened every drawer looking for anything that I could use to defend myself. The only thing I found was a broken chair leg. I grabbed it and I turned around just in time to see him walking through the doorway, still smiling. He walked like he had all the time in the world. I swung the chair leg, hit his shoulder hard, but he didn't even flinch. He muttered something about his blood being different now, that they couldn't track him anymore, that he had finally sealed the entry points. He came at me with a knife, not fast, just steady. I dodged and knocked over a table, grabbed a glass and smashed it against his head. He blinked, but he didn't stop. Blood dripped from his cheek, and he laughed.
It's not mine. It's theirs. I'm clean inside. I need this blood. You do understand, right?
I ducked under his arm and ran back to the front. Tried the door, still locked. I turned around and he was already standing there, like he hadn't moved, just appeared. His chest rose and felt like he was breathing through a straw.
You smell like copper. They did something to your brain.
I charged at him, hit him hard in the ribs. We both went down. He dropped the knife and I kicked it away, but he grabbed my leg and bit down on my calf hard. I screamed and punched him in the temple until he let go. I crawled towards the door, dragging my leg, but he got up slowly, wiped his mouth with his sleeve. He looked almost sad, like I had betrayed him. The moment stretched. He wasn't chasing me now, just watching, breathing hard, mumbling things I couldn't understand. I dragged myself up and ran upstairs. It was a mistake, but I needed distance. I needed a way out. Every door up there was sealed except one, a bedroom. I went inside and slammed it shut behind me, pushed the desk in front of it. The room was disgusting, the bed soaked in old blood. The walls covered in paper, scribbles, drawings, newspaper clippings, all about blood, organs, diagrams of veins. I looked out the window, too high to jump. The streets below were empty, no cars, no lights. Then I heard him outside the door.
You are like them. You are like them. You filthy liar. I will feast in your dirty blood.
The door shuddered. He started slamming his body against it. I searched the room for something, anything. Found a metal lamp, unplugged it and held it like a bat. The desk cracked. His hand reached in first, then the knife. I hit him in the wrist. He screamed, pulled back. Blood sprayed the wall, but he didn't fall. I grabbed one of the wooden slats from the broken bed frame and jammed it through the door, just enough to edge it shut, for now. I couldn't stay. I opened the closet and found a crawl space, dark, narrow. It led into the attic. I pulled myself inside, dragging my bleeding leg, and started crawling. Behind me, I heard the bedroom door splinter. The crawl space was tight. My leg was useless. I could hear him downstairs now, talking to himself, to someone who wasn't there. The house creaked with every step he took. He was talking about hearts, about needing a clean one. I searched the attic and found a small hatch, pushed it open and saw the roof. Cold wind hit my face. I crawled out and stood up, shaky. The street below looked closer. I lowered myself as far as I could and I dropped. I landed hard. My ankle cracked, but I didn't stop. I limped to the nearest house and banged on the door. No one answered. I kept going until I saw headlights. A pickup truck stopped and the guy inside took one look at me and called the cops. They found 4 bodies in that house, all different rooms. Some had been drained of blood. One had her organs missing. The man inside, Richard Chase, was arrested the next day. He didn't resist. He told them he was trying to protect people from them. He never thought he was doing anything wrong. He thought he was saving people. The papers called him the Vampire of Sacramento. Said he drank blood to keep his heart from shrinking. Said he believed Nazis were turning his stomach to dust while manipulating other people's minds. The story is based on Richard Trenton Chase, known as the Vampire of Sacramento. He was an American serial killer who carried out a series of grotesque and violent murders in California during the 1970s. Over the course of just a few weeks, he killed 6 people, including children, in crimes marked by extreme brutality. His acts went far beyond simple homicide. He mutilated bodies, performed necrophilic acts, removed organs, and drank his victims' blood. One of his most disturbing crimes involved the murder of a pregnant woman, whose body he desecrated in ways that horrified even seasoned investigators. Chase believed that his own blood was turning to dust, and that he was dying unless he ingested fresh blood to replenish it. He developed a delusional system in which drinking blood, animal and human, was the way to survive. This belief wasn't just a twisted fantasy, it was his reality, and it dictated his every move. He thought people were poisoning him through the walls and manipulating him with secret rays. He saw blood consumption as a form of self-medication. In his mind, each kill was a medical necessity, not a choice.
The first thing you need to understand is that nothing about me suggested I was the kind of man this would happen to, and that belief is exactly what made everything worse. I worked in an office, a regular job. I didn't think danger came from places like my desk, my apartment, or a casual conversation near the printer. Marla joined the company in early February, a few days before Valentine's Day. She wasn't loud, didn't dress to stand out, and didn't try to force herself into conversations. When she spoke, she did it softly, carefully, like she was always afraid of saying the wrong thing. That made people lower their voices around her, including me. She started talking to me after a few days, usually about work at first, then about small personal things like food she liked or shows she watched. I thought she was very pretty, and I knew she was single. Before asking her out, I told myself not to overthink it, not to assign meaning where there wasn't any, and not to expect anything more than a simple drink after work. Valentine's Day made it feel like a good excuse, and actually a romantic idea. When I invited her, she smiled in a way that looked relieved, and she agreed immediately. The bar was close to my apartment, quiet enough to talk without raising our voices. We stayed longer than planned, and the conversation never stalled, which made me relax more than I should have. She laughed easily, asked questions that felt personal without being invasive, and kept telling me how comfortable she felt around me. When the bar closed, I offered her the couch without much thought, mostly because it felt awkward to send her home late. She accepted quickly as if she had already expected the offer. That should have stood out to me, but at the time, it just felt like chemistry. In the morning, I woke up to the sound of movement in my kitchen, which immediately put me on edge because I live alone and I am not used to hearing anyone else in my space. Marla was already dressed, cooking breakfast, moving confidently through my apartment like she knew where everything was. I felt surprised and slightly uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem ungrateful or rude. She left later that day, kissed my cheek casually, and said she would text me. I watched her walk away and told myself it had just been a good date, nothing more. That weekend I went out with friends like I used to, but I kept thinking about how fast everything had happened, even though I didn't fully admit it to myself. I tried to convince myself that I was just nervous because it had been a while since I dated anyone seriously. When I got home late that night and unlocked my door, I immediately knew something was wrong because the lights were on and the TV was playing, even though I was certain I had turned everything off before leaving. My body reacted before my mind did, and I froze in the doorway listening. Marla was sitting on my couch wearing comfortable clothes, watching television like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I asked how she got inside, my voice came out tighter than I expected, and she responded calmly saying she had made a copy of my key earlier, asking if that was okay like it was a small favor. I felt very confused and somewhat nervous. I told her that was too much, that we were moving too fast and that she should have asked me first. She nodded, apologized softly, and then asked what I wanted for dinner, completely ignoring the fact that I was visibly shaken. She stayed the entire weekend. Every time I tried to bring up the conversation again, she redirected it, smiled, or acted hurt enough to make me back off. I started feeling trapped inside my own apartment, sleeping lightly, locking my bedroom door at night, and listening for movement. By Monday, I was exhausted, anxious, and desperate for distance, believing that work would create a barrier she couldn't cross. That illusion shattered the moment I saw her at the office, standing confidently among coworkers, laughing and touching people's arms while telling stories. When I approached the group, the mood shifted immediately, and several coworkers congratulated me, mentioning how happy they were for us. My confusion turned into dread when Marla casually said we were a couple and that we were planning a future together. She spoke about marriage like it was a scheduled task, saying she was just waiting for me to propose and that she trusted I would do it soon. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my hands started shaking in a way I couldn't control. I asked her to talk after work, barely holding myself together for the rest of the day. Outside, I finally said everything I had been holding back, explaining that we were not together, that I never agreed to any of this, and that she needed to return the key and to leave me alone. Her reaction was immediate and intense. Her face hardened, her breathing became shallow, and her voice dropped when she told me I was humiliating her. After that, she stopped speaking to me entirely, and the silence felt heavier rather than relieving. Weeks passed with no interaction, and I slowly began to relax, thinking the situation had resolved itself. But the worst was yet to come. It all started on one of our coworkers' birthdays. I attended, confident that Marla wouldn't be there. She had been very isolated in recent weeks and didn't even have a relationship with the birthday guy. We heard a scream echo through the room, sharp enough to silence everyone. Marla stood outside the bathroom, shaking, crying, barely able to speak, saying one of our coworkers had attacked her and that she defended herself. Inside, the man lay unconscious on the floor. The room filled with panic, shouting and fear, and people immediately surrounded her, offering comfort and support. I felt guilt rise in my chest, thinking that maybe my rejection had pushed her into something traumatic. That thought ate at me, and I started checking on her, walking her home and staying close, believing I was helping someone fragile. Without asking, she moved back into my apartment. This time, she didn't even pretend it was temporary. She was cheerful, energetic, and disturbingly unaffected by what had happened. The man was hospitalized, unconscious, and she talked about it like it was already behind her. The disconnect terrified me. I slept less, avoided being alone with her when possible, and started feeling watched even when she wasn't in the room. One day, 2 police officers knocked on my door. They were asking for Marla by name. They explained everything carefully, telling me that the hospitalized man had woken up, spoken to them, and denied every accusation. The security footage confirmed his story, showing Marla following him, drugging his drink, and attacking him. As they spoke, Marla appeared behind me, calm and smiling as if this was just another inconvenience. When they arrested her, she didn't struggle. She looked at me and said, "Love required commitment, and commitment required action." I felt sick, dizzy, and ashamed, realizing how close I had come to being the next person she framed or harmed. Valentine's Day still arrives every year, but now it feels like a warning rather than a celebration. I learned that danger doesn't always come loudly or violently at first. Sometimes it comes quietly, smiling, and already holding a copy of your key.
My friend Hannah and I decided to celebrate a different kind of Valentine's Day, honoring our friendship without thinking about our broken hearts. It was just a simple girls' night out. But our lives changed completely. Hannah and I have known each other since we were little girls. She was the perfect date. I packed a backpack with cheap wine, snacks, and pajamas and went to Hannah's house because neither of us wanted to be alone that night. We were both recently separated, but that wasn't going to stop us from enjoying the day. The plan was simple. Stay inside, watch movies, and let the night pass without making it a big deal. Couples had already disappeared into their plans, and the street felt empty earlier than usual. We put on a movie, opened the wine, and tried to relax. Half an hour later, we realized we forgot most of the snacks. We laughed it off, grabbed our jackets, and went out, telling ourselves it would only take a few minutes. The walk back from the store should have been forgettable, but something about it stuck with me later. The street was almost silent, until we heard footsteps behind us, close enough to notice, slow enough to make us turn around. It was Ethan, Hannah's neighbor. I recognized him immediately because he always looked like someone trying not to be seen. He smiled too wide when he saw us and asked how we were doing, then asked if we were planning to spend the night alone. The question came out casual, but his eyes stayed fixed on Hannah. He started talking without stopping, explaining that his wife had left him for another man, saying it like a joke, even though his hands kept shaking. He said nights like Valentine's Day made everything worse and that people never understood what betrayal really felt like. Hannah nodded politely and tried to unlock the door while he talked. We told him we were sorry and said we were tired. He finally stepped back, waved, and walked toward his house. We locked the door behind us and stood there for a second longer than necessary. Hannah said he was strange, then shrugged it off, and we went back to the living room. Nothing else happened for a while. Then, a sound came from outside late at night, after the second movie had already started and the wine was almost gone. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to pull my attention away from the screen. Hannah muted the TV, and we both listened without speaking, trying to decide if it was worth reacting. There was a long pause where the house felt exposed, like every wall was thinner than it should have been. I told myself it was probably nothing and stood up, because neither of us wanted to admit we were scared already. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole, seeing only darkness and the empty porch. When I opened the door, Ethan rushed forward so fast I didn't even have time to react. He slammed into the door with his shoulder, forcing his way inside and knocking me backward. The door closed behind him, and the lock clicked before I could even think about running. He had a gun in his hand, and his face looked completely different from earlier. He started yelling immediately, demanding to know where Hannah's ex was, shouting his name over and over. Hannah kept saying he doesn't live there anymore, her voice shaking as she tried to back away. Ethan stepped closer, waving the gun and screaming that he knew the truth, that everyone was lying to him. He accused Hannah's ex of stealing his wife and ruining his life, and he would not listen when she said he wasn't there. He pointed the gun at us and told us to move, and we obeyed because there was nothing else we could do. He forced us down the hallway and into the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind us. He kept pacing while asking the same questions again and again. Hannah lied and said her ex was coming back soon, hoping it would calm him or buy time, but it only made him angrier. Before touching us, he stood there staring, like he was deciding something. That silence was worse than the shouting, because neither of us knew what would happen next. Then he told us to sit on the bed and not look at him. He ordered us to take off our clothes until we were in our underwear, and we did it slowly, shaking so badly it was hard to move. He tied our hands with something thin and rough that burned into our skin, then took out his phone and started filming, laughing and telling us to say his name. He hit Hannah first, then turned to me, moving with intention instead of panic. Every strike felt planned, like he wanted us to remember it.
He kept yelling that nobody disrespected him, and that this was what happened to people who took things from him. When he pulled out the lighter, Hannah started crying louder, begging him to stop. He didn't listen. He burned us in short bursts, watching our reactions and laughing like it entertained him. There was a moment when Hannah managed to free one hand, and I saw hope flash across her face before fear took over. She grabbed a heavy vase from the dresser and swung it at him, hitting his shoulder instead of his head. Ethan reacted instantly, grabbing her hair and throwing her to the floor. The gun slid away, but he didn't even look at it. He picked up a thick wooden rod from the corner of the room and raised it without hesitation. He hit her again and again, his face empty, his movements slow and deliberate. Hannah screamed at first, then stopped responding, and he kept going even after her body went still. I covered my face and pressed myself against the wall, unable to move, unable to look away from the sound. When he finally stopped, he stood there, breathing hard, then turned to me without emotion. He lit a blanket on fire and threw it onto the floor, watching the flames grow. He locked the door from the outside and walked away, leaving us inside as the fire spread. Smoke filled the room quickly, burning my throat and eyes. My wrists hurt so badly I could barely think, but panic forced me to move. I crawled across the floor to Hannah, touching her face and realizing she was gone. I worked the ties against the broken bed frame until they snapped, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control them. The flames climbed the walls and the heat pressed in from every direction. I smashed the window with the wooden rod, cutting myself as I climbed out. I ran barefoot into the street, screaming for help, until lights turned on and doors opened. Police and fire trucks arrived in minutes, and Ethan was arrested that same night. He was sentenced to life in prison. Hannah died in that room. The house burned down completely. Valentine's Day passed like it never existed.
If you are watching this on Valentine's Day, stop for a second, because this story starts in a normal place and ends in a way that still keeps me awake at night. That day I was walking with my dog in the same park near my apartment like every morning. While my dog pulled the leash near the fountain, I heard my name spoken clearly behind me, and the sound made my shoulders tense before I even turned around. When I faced the voice, I saw a woman standing there with a calm smile that did not move when she noticed my reaction. It took me several seconds to recognize her, because my brain resisted the idea before accepting it. Her name was Lena, and we had not seen each other since we were teenagers, back when promises were easy and consequences felt unreal. We started talking in an awkward way, filling the silence with safe questions that avoided anything important, and I noticed quickly that she answered too fast, like she had rehearsed every possible version of this conversation. I also noticed that she watched me closely while answering, like she was checking if I matched an image she had kept for years. She told me she knew I lived nearby and that she had seen me walking my dog before, which made me uncomfortable even though I tried not to show it. When I asked how long she had been back in town, she said she returned recently and waited for the right moment to see me, and the way she said it made my chest tighten even though her tone stayed soft. I knew I would run into you eventually. You live close. It was only a matter of time. I tried to laugh it off, but she watched my face closely, like she was checking my reaction. When we said goodbye, she called my name again, and when I turned, her expression changed slightly. I didn't forget the promise. I'm back. I smiled out of reflex, nodded, and walked away faster than usual, already trying to convince myself that it meant nothing. Valentine's Day arrived a few days later, and I tried not to think about Lena even though the memory of her words kept coming back when I was alone. That morning, a knock on my door interrupted my routine, and before opening it, I stood still, listening, feeling my heart beat harder than it should. When I opened the door, she was there, standing straight and calm, looking at me like she belonged in that space. I asked how she found my address, and she avoided the question without changing her expression. She reminded me of something we said when we were 15, about a silly promise when we were teens. We promised each other that if we weren't married to other people by the time we turned 30, we would marry each other. And here I am. I waited 15 years for this moment. Hearing it out loud made my skin crawl because it sounded serious in her mouth. I told her it was a childish joke and explained that I had a girlfriend, trying to keep my voice steady. Her reaction was immediate and overwhelming, as she started crying loudly and accused me of betraying her, stepping closer until I had to block her with my arms. I warned her to leave and said I would call the police if she did not calm down.
You lied to me! You chose someone else!
She stopped crying suddenly, wiped her face, and told me I was making a mistake, adding that we would be together forever, either alone or with no one else. Then she walked away, leaving me shaking in my doorway.
You will regret this.
I almost canceled my Valentine's dinner that night, but I convinced myself that fear was not a reason to change plans, even though my hands were shaking while I grabbed my keys. I texted my girlfriend Rachel to tell her I was on my way, and she replied that I should meet her at the restaurant instead to keep the surprise. At the restaurant, time passed too slowly, and every minute without a response made my thoughts darker and harder to control. I called her phone again and again, listening to it ring until my throat felt tight. When someone sat across from me, I looked up ready to complain, but the face in front of me froze me in place. She had Rachel's hair, Rachel's clothes, and Rachel's posture, but her eyes were wrong, focused, and excited.
You look tense. Valentine's Day does that to people.
Lena smiled and leaned closer, and my body reacted before my mind as fear ran through me and made it hard to breathe. My hands trembled as I told her to stop and demanded to know where Rachel was, but she laughed openly, enjoying the attention and the confusion around us. People stared while she acted calm and affectionate, touching my hand and calling me by my girlfriend's name. Security approached when I raised my voice and I tried to explain that she was pretending, that something was wrong, but Lena started crying again, playing the role perfectly. We were asked to leave, and outside she followed me, still talking about destiny and promises.
You should not have rejected me. This could have been easy. We are meant to be together, but I fixed the problem.
Those last words made me feel desperate. I ran to my car and drove to Rachel's apartment as fast as traffic allowed, calling her nonstop while my fear turned into panic. When I reached her place, the door was unlocked. Inside the bedroom, I found her on the floor, tied, shaved, and lifeless, and my legs almost gave out as I realized she was gone. The walls were decorated with her hair placed carefully, like trophies. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Lena standing in the doorway, holding a bag and smiling with satisfaction. She told me she removed the obstacle and that now we could finally be together. When she reached for me, I stepped back and tripped, and when she grabbed my arm, I reacted without thinking, kicking her knee and pushing her away. She fell hard and hit her head, screaming my name. I ran out of the apartment and drove straight to the police station, barely able to speak, barely able to breathe, but desperate to get away from her. Lena was arrested that night, and they later confirmed that she had planned everything for years, watching, waiting, and preparing. Rachel was buried a week later, and I still visit her grave, even though it hurts every time.